use the gavel for this one? All right, let's get started. Do we have questions on the agenda? No? I had questions.
I have some questions.
Do you want to go with yours?
So the recycling center, I see it's like a 4-year contract. AI and all this technology's going to be up to speed in 4 years, I think, and I think it's a long contract. Is there anything that they're going to do to upgrade it along the way, or?
Yeah, we were gonna ask for the recycling center discussion, because there is a presentation. It might be better to hear the presentation, engage in the Q&A as part of the presentation, and save that for the meeting proper, if that's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The audio out there.
Okay.
And my question, I had questions specific to that, so I will not ask them now. I did see your response,
You did respond.
but, yeah, we'll get a better overview.
Okay.
Okay. Any council reports then? Obi? I'm sorry, Counselor Izadi.
No, ma'am.
Yes, Adams 5, Adams 5 Star Schools. They reached out and asked that I participate in a blueprint for community-driven plan for the district's future. And the last day to give a response is today. So I just wanted to announce that in case anybody had any questions or concerns with me joining that plan. It's 2 meetings, one in January, one in February, and to help build their future. And so I don't see a problem if anybody, I figured I'd bring it up for discussion. Yeah.
I don't have any problem with it. I think that's cool that they asked you. I typically just for protocols with stuff like that, unless you want to speak, as long as you're speaking for yourself as you, and then if there's anything that you want the weight of the whole council behind, if you think it would be helpful, then I would just ask you bring it back so that we can have a discussion, and then if it's helpful, then that's extra weight of the
Right.
6 of us.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yep.
Because I've been trying to think through that, and so that's why I brought it here, so thank you. That's my report.
Counselor Ireland?
Nothing to report.
Nope.
Mayor? I forgot.
Well, we had Santa before Christmas happened, and that was an exciting day. Last I heard, there was around 150 some kids that were delivered their toys and had Christmas because of Santa cops, and our officers always on each of the beats deliver those, and I can only imagine the smile that they receive. On this past Friday, my doctor allowed me to attend a urban drainage Zoom call for an hour, and the big discussion was on mill levy. And we had a couple of people that felt we should make a good gesture of cutting the mill back. It would have been cutting back $2.88 per household to say that we care about the property taxes that are going to be wild again this year. The meeting was just totally discussion until the motion came. And $2.88, and all of our Big Dry Creek and the areas we have that could flood, for that $2.88, and I think I put this out early, and I didn't hear from anybody, but I voted no to keep it what it is, because any community that has to deal with a flood and we didn't do maintenance because of $2.88 that they didn't receive, I thought was not the right decision. So that went down in flames. They did keep the mill levy what it is, and those are the 2 meetings I went to.
Thank you. I last week went to the Dr. Cog meeting, was a work session, Denver Regional Council of Governments, and that was just an overview of the work that they're doing on a regional housing needs assessment. And that's relevant for us because they're looking at everything from, Boulder down to, I think it goes to Colorado Springs, I could be wrong, but it's quite a large area, and they're trying to better understand how the housing will be distributed over the next 25 plus years. So their timeline is through 2050, and they're trying to hone in on the next 10 years to understand what is the housing need and where does that lie with respect to tenure, i.e. ownership versus rental, as well as income level. And with that, they're also trying to understand what is that distribution and how does that play out to subregions. There's 4 or 5 subregions. Sorry, the map is not coming to my head at the moment. But and within those subregions, then the cities would have some understanding of what they might capture based on transportation and transit, as well as job growth or lack thereof, and overall housing demand. So we each would have some information on what we might be planning for. So that the sub-regional analysis is yet to come. They're more at the regional level. And what was the other?
When was the last one done?
They haven't done one before.
The
This is
first
new. We have federal legislation now that's tying housing now into transportation and funding, allowing for regional councils of government to take into account housing and their considerations for transportation. And right now it's not tied to any funding, but over time it could be a consideration in how they evaluate funding applications. So, long story short, they're doing this housing needs assessment. I think it's a good start. What was really, I will say, the most interesting thing for me was in the next, through 2050, we need about 500,000 units in the region. And about 250,000 of those, I'm going to say give or take 30, are 60% of the AMI or below. So it's a good amount that are going to need to be highly subsidized. So just something to note, and of course that will be more fleshed out as they get into the more sub-regional analysis. But it's a pretty, yeah, no.
How are they taking into account each municipality's housing needs assessment?
That, I think, will be more in the sub-regional. Right now, they're going macro down to just trends and focusing on the transit systems and just where job growth is in a macro sense. They have yet to go into more of the detail in the sub-regional analysis.
So the sub-regional will be this kind of analysis of each city's own housing needs assessment?
Sub-regional are big chunks. It's like, for instance, I think Weld and Adams are tied together. It's big. It's county level or multi-county level. So it might get more, I don't know. More to come on that, I will, as they give us more information.
Do you say anything about education, like schools in this housing? No.
No, but what is your question about it so I can?
Well, where are they gonna school all these people that they say are gonna move in? Because we're like tearing down a school now, and there's places that don't have enough schools. And there's schools that people really don't like and they don't wanna go to anymore. We learned about that OB tonight. So.
Yes, yeah, they are taking into account demographics. So that, and part of that will play into what kinds of housing unit types are needed in those 500,000 units. So we'll get more detail. Right now, they just gave us a big overview, so I don't think it was enough for us to get
Sorry
good
for all the
answers.
questions.
No, it's good. It's fun stuff.
It's interesting.
And anybody, yeah.
Counselor Hott's online too.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Counselor Hott, apologies.
I'm good. I don't have any updates this week. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the reminder. Okay, all right, we don't have any other report items. Go to the city manager's report?
We'll do that on the dais.
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay,
We're done.
Mayor Pro Tem,
uh-huh. Yes?
I just report that my heart surgery went well. It was the 26th of December. I am in my second week of recovery, and my first week was totally, I had no cancer pills or anything, so we didn't have those complications. Then the next week I started my first week of my 3 weeks of cancer pills. Just finished week 1, and start some scans tomorrow for where I've been with all of that, so they can see where the baseline was and where I am. But as for my heart surgery, it's 6 months recovery. He said once I get my driving privileges back, and they scheduled me for 12 weeks of 3 days a week rehab, I will sailing back, and each day gets better. But I didn't know when I answered 3 texts one day that I would need a nap afterwards. So I am heeding his words. I know he has my best interest, but and he's been through it many times. But Thursday I get the rest of my staples out, and I think everything's going to look good. So I just continue to start putting some energy back into me.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we're all, one, really impressed with where you are right now, but two, really hoping that your recovery continues to go so well. So,
Well, he said I would never make the night. He said, look, you have to be taken, you have to be picked up. If you fell asleep on the couch watching, you're at home. So at 3:30 this afternoon, I understood I didn't even I'd be able to be here for this part of the meeting. So he knows what he's talking about. And I did take a nap, and let's get her done.
okay. This portion is over. We'll see you over yonder at 7. Yeah.
That's first.
Westminster City Council meeting for January 8th, 2024. If you can all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. All right, we thank you for coming and would like to remind all in attendance that our meetings are subject to the rules of decorum that are posted at the back of the room. These rules are in effect while our meetings are in session, as well as during breaks and transitions between meetings. We want to be sure all feel welcome and remind all there is an expectation that no attendee shall disrupt this meeting and that threats and intimidation are prohibited. Signs and placards are prohibited in council chambers, and all attendees shall remain seated in the seats provided, not in the aisles, nor shall the doorways be blocked. We do have the mayor and Councilor Hott joining virtually, and so if we want to take a roll call on having them attend virtually.
Councillor Carmelia.
Present.
No, this is the poll on allowing your colleagues to participate virtually.
Yes.
Councillor DeMott.
Yes.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Councillor Hott. I'll come back to Councillor Hott. Mayor McNally.
Are you, Mayor and Councilor Hott, are you able to hear us?
Can we call for a break?
All right, let's take a break.
Mayor and Councillor Hott, can you hear the room now?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. Councillor Hott?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes, this is Councilor Hott.
Okay, I'm going to have Mayor Pro Tem repeat what we were pulling on, and then we'll start over with the vote.
Okay, resuming the
Okay.
meeting, and we are taking a poll on including the mayor and Councilor Hott virtually.
Councillor Carmelia.
Yes.
Councillor DeMott.
Yes.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Councillor Hott.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela.
Yes.
And Councillor Ireland.
Okay. All right, let's move on. We're going to do roll call.
Councillor Carmelia.
Present.
Councillor DeMott.
Present.
Councillor Azadi.
Here.
Councillor Hott.
Present.
Mayor McNally.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela.
Here.
And Councillor Ireland. Councillor Ireland. I'm sorry, can I have you repeat that?
Can you hear it? Present.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to approve the minutes of the December 18th, 2023 meetings as presented.
Do we need a second?
I second.
All right. Oh, roll call. Do I call the roll call? I'm sorry.
I just need a voice vote so everybody can say yes or no or aye or nay.
Everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
Okay. All right, we have no presentations for this evening, so we're going to move into public comment. The public comment portion of the meeting is an opportunity for the public to communicate with the city council. Each participant will be given no more than 5 minutes on any topic they choose. Public comment is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. If there is a public hearing scheduled for the item on which you wish to speak, please hold your comments and testify when that public hearing is called. Tonight, there are no public hearings on the agenda. This evening, the city clerk has informed me that we received one email by the deadline, which has been posted to the online agenda packet and forwarded directly to the city council, and we have 4 voicemails that will be played back after our live speakers have concluded with their remarks. So I'll just note that I will, at the 5-minute mark, I will let you know when that time is up. City Clerk, would you please call our first live speaker to the podium?
The first speaker is Scott Schilling.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm going to, when I was here last time, I said I had 5 challenges for the council. I got through 4 of them. I want to get it through my 5th and final challenge to the council. Challenge number 5, okay, on voting. I want to first show this chart. This chart, the green section on the bottom down here, are contributions to the candidates from residents. That's green. The contributions up above in red are from outside entities, primarily from building associations. Red is building, green. So clearly, 2 of the people who got voted in were heavily funded from outside organizations, primarily building associations. My challenge to these people, and to all of you, frankly, is when it comes time to approve yet another code exception, a building code exception, ask yourself, is this vote that I'm voting yes for good for the city, or are you voting yes out of obligation? My fear is that you're voting yes out of obligation. And I'm not sure, but I understand that there's some new campaign finance rules. I'll investigate. But for these, pay attention, okay? Vote what's best for the city, not what's best for the building associations. And before my time is over, one of the things I talked about was the water, the water treatment plant. Indeed, the funding for that is going to cost $2 per 1,000 gallons. And where is that money going to come from? Are they going to add it to the bill, or are they going to pay for it from another way? Well, I've had my nose stuck in the 2002 financials for the city. Probably not a lot of people get into that and go to the depth that I can do. Well, I'll be back in 2 weeks, folks, to really talk about this funding for this thing and where this money's coming from and where this money's going. And I think that the city should be shocked. And I would really want to try to figure out how in the world to communicate some of this stuff to the city. Our website is wonderful. It's an amazing website, very well done. But when you have to click through 30 pages to get to the financial statement, or have to really know how to navigate this thing, I don't think it gets used very often. I actually went back and I did the YouTube and looked at myself from last week. There were 6 views. 6. We have 118,000 people in the city. So we have to figure out a really better way to communicate what's going on. And with that, folks, I yield my time.
Could we ask that you give your chart to the clerk so it can be part of the record so we can see it?
Thank you, Counselor.
The next speaker is Bruce Baker.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. When one is not in the decision-making things, that doesn't mean we give up on what's in the best interest of the city and the best interest of all of us. And I have a great affinity for this city and doing things correctly, and that I'm here to collaborate. Okay? And I have a couple comments. The first is on the agenda item about the recycle center. And when I read through that, I was completely confused because what is being presented to you tonight is not what I thought staff was going to bring to you. I would highly suggest that you ask staff to fill in all the blank spots, and let me share with you the blank spots that I see are there. One of our guiding principles is thrift in this city, and we don't want to duplicate efforts. And we also, another guiding principle is working with our sister cities, our neighbors. That's what we do with the fire department. We have a mutual aid agreement so we can better serve all of our residents. Well, I saw nothing about working with Broomfield, Thornton, or Arvada about recycle. Why not? Did we ask and they really rebuffed us? Did they say they didn't want any of our recycle and they didn't want to work with us in any way to make that happen? I think they'd be very amenable to working with us, and we could support with money their efforts. And it would probably be a whole lot less than signing a 5-year leasing arrangement in some buildings. The other thing I didn't see is, where's our business plan? How much use is this center going to get? If you went to a bank to borrow money and you didn't have a business plan, the bank would say, go back and make up the business plan. We need to know how many users you're going to have. We need to know how much revenue you're going to bring in. We need to know how much stuff you're going to ship out. And also, is this really convenient to work Monday through Friday? Is that when our people are going to drive to it? And even though 80% of the people are supposedly within 10 minutes, I'm in the 20%. On weekdays during business hours, is that convenient? Is that going to be used? And then, how much is it going to be used? If it's just going to be used a little bit, sharing this with other cities, I think is a much better way. And then two, I know of desire to recycle cardboard, paper, and metal. I know of no desire to recycle plastic. We've heard stories that the plastic goes to the dump, and all the recycle is just a feel-good thing. And when it comes to electronics and other paint you can take to the paint store. I take mine to the Sherwin-Williams because every gallon of paint we buy has a 25% tax. I take it to Sherwin-Williams, Sherwin-Williams takes care of it. So there has to be an end user for anything else, for anything we recycle, or we're not recycling. And I don't want to send electronics across the ocean to be dumped in some foreign country. So I think these are all questions that I would hope you would want answered before you vote us into a 5-year lease of buildings that we probably don't need. And then I would like to also ask if you can understand how WIDA, which this board runs, made a contract with Laramie and Company when their contract expired the end of last year. I don't think the city manager has the authority, well, he's the principal worker of the WIDA board, has the authority to take on a $200,000 contract. And the last thing I like to say before the 5 minutes runs out is we dropped out of the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Community Roundtable because it's a useless board that's voluntary and has no authority. And some other speakers will tell you
Mr.
well,
Baker,
the travesty of going on.
thank you for your comments. Thank you.
My apologies. The next speaker is John Palmer.
Welcome.
Good evening. I would like to echo what Mr. Baker talked about with the recycling center. I don't think we've had a lot of thought go into that whole process. And the expenditure of the city, I believe the number was $180,000. We don't own property that we could do this ourselves. Hell, there's lots of property at downtown Westminster. The new downtown, why can't we take a piece of that we already own, that we're not paying out of the city budget? There's other city properties, the one down behind Bob Briggs' greenhouse, big prime place. And as far as Mr. Baker talked about, 80% of the people being within 10 minutes, I have to kind of disagree with that. It just doesn't seem well thought out at this point. Plus the hours of operation. 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, and I believe it was 9 to 3 on Saturdays, compared to the 3 recycling centers we have now that are 24-hour. Don't think it's money well spent. Next, I'd like to move on to under item 10, the A and the B, with us vacating more property to the Uplands Varde Partners people. We've already vacated Shaw Boulevard. Now we're wanting to vacate more property to them. That's the people's property, not the city. It's the people of the city's property. Why are we giving it away to Uplands? These are non-revocable giveaways. They should be made to pay for it or give up property in lieu of, as in PLD. Granted, it's not a lot this time, but how many times are they going to come before this council in the next 5 years and want us to vacate more property to them for free? They spent a lot of money to buy the property. When they bought it from Pillar of Fire, they can certainly pay the city for the property they're receiving. And again, I have a problem with us vacating it because it's non-revocable. What if there's a change in the plan? We're stuck. We're stuck with the decision that was poorly thought out. With that, I hope you, again, think about what Mr. Baker talked about with the recycling center, and I hope you look into these vacating of properties to the Uplands people, because now you're going to be setting a precedent, and every developer that comes in here is going to want you to vacate property to them. It's our property, not just yours, not the city's. It's the people of this city. It's our property. Don't give it away. Thank you.
The next speaker is Teddy Kolkowski.
Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Teddy Kolkowski, and I live in Westminster. I'm here tonight to advocate for my 2 children, under the age of 5, and other families who have been forced to live under a cloud of lead contamination, noise, and other pollution from Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. Many parents, including myself, were shocked to learn about lead usage in these aircraft, highlighting the urgent need for comprehensive public health campaign. There's a clear lack of awareness among parents, resulting in inadequate testing for our children. This issue needs immediate attention for the safety of our communities. In addition, I'm upset to learn this council, as well as other public officials, were aware of these dangers for many years. Dr. Sammy Zerhan, the leading expert in this area, is right here in Colorado and yet has never been called to help on this matter by any health department or by elected officials like those who run the city of Westminster. The press is sympathetic to this situation. I have learned so much from the articles in Denver Post, Westminster Window, Guardian, Broomfield Enterprise, Boulder Daily Camera, and especially the in-depth reporting from Colorado Public Radio. Editorials in these publications and stories aired on local TV bring increasing awareness and scrutiny of the actions of elected officials to this matter. Dr. Zerhan had a study on airport much like RMMA, but with much lower traffic. The report produced lead contaminant that caused children in the area to have blood levels equivalent to those seen in Flint, Michigan, at the height of the water crisis there. Estimates of microparticulate lead from airplanes at RMMA tell us they are literally spreading up to a ton of this poison annually, and their traffic is growing. How can we possibly protect our kids when this is allowed to go on? Remember, there are 0 safe levels of lead. Also in the press, Rock Creek residents with vacated navigation agreements filed a lawsuit against Jefferson County. If Rock Creek's legal action proves successful and aircraft are barred from flying over their neighborhood, I worry this restriction could lead to increased traffic, potentially disrupting the lives of Westminster citizens. There are 2 things this council must do now. Demand the CDPHE bring Dr. Sammy Zerhan into their plan for community education and serum testing for impacted communities. We expect this education program to begin no later than March 15, 2024. If the CDPHE won't do it, Westminster should take this action on their own. Divert money from the useless community noise roundtable to retain council so that Westminster has representation on the new playing field set up by Superior Town Council. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sierra Crosby. Welcome.
Hello, WIF Council. Thank you for your time today. My name is Sierra Crosby, and I live in Westbrook in Westminster, Jefferson County. I am advocating for my 2 children under the age of 4, 1.5 and 3.5. We've lived here since 2016 with other families in our neighborhood who have been impacted by lead, noise, and other pollution from the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. Recently, the EPA made a significant announcement regarding lead pollution from small planes, emphasizing the threat that it poses to human health, especially affecting children under the age of 5. It's crucial to note there are no safe levels of lead. To be honest, I was unaware of that lead was still utilized in these aircraft until I read that report, and like that in the article, and I and others had assumed it was banned long ago. This lack of awareness of the issue demands immediate attention. Even pediatricians I've talked to are unaware that lead can be, absorbed through the air and you don't have to actually drink it or other methods. So I think that's a crucial point that we need to educate everyone in the community that this is a real risk, and there's an airport right near us that is creating this risk. Looking at the RMMA and Jefferson County's plan to transition to unleaded fuel by fall of 2024, a quick glance at the JEFCO's website reveals an important detail. They mention a transition, but notably omit any indication of exclusively supplying unleaded fuel. Leaded fuel will continue to be offered and available for anyone who wants it. Moreover, analyzing sales data from Centennial Airport since the introduction of unleaded fuel in May, it's alarming to see that the total sales of leaded fuel have actually risen. This increase is primarily due to the growing traffic there, especially from flight schools. This underlying issue strikes at the core of the problem with airports like Centennial and RMMA. Speaking about the transition from leaded to unleaded fuel at RMMA, their FAQ section highlights a point. The current unleaded fuel, which is 9494UL, is incompatible with many existing piston engine aircraft.
so a full transition is not possible at this time. This incompatibility poses significant safety risks to pilots if mistakenly used in these planes. However, what about the safety of our community and our children from lead while we wait for this full transition? Instead, estimates of microparticulate lead from airplanes at RMMA tell us that they are spreading up to a ton of this poison annually, and their traffic is growing. It's essential to consider the safety of everyone, our children, not only those in the air. This airport is a clear environmental and public health risk as long as any airplane there continues to use leaded fuel. I am asking that this council demand that the CDPHE bring Dr. Sami Zaran here in Colorado into their plan for community re-education and serum testing for impacted communities. We expect that this educational program begin no later than March 15th, 2024, and if the CDPHE won't do it, Westminster should take this action on their own. Thank you very much for your time.
The next speaker is Carolyn Farbman.
Welcome.
Hello, Council. I'm Carolyn Farbman, a resident of Jefferson County and a citizen of Westminster. I have concerns about Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport, which is a public facility owned by Jefferson County. It's important to note that RMMA chooses to operate and expand using taxpayer-funded grants from the FAA and CDOT. It is not a business. Jefferson County chooses to engage in these grants without seeking input from surrounding communities. I have lived in Westbrook since 2017 with my husband and now 4-year-old son. We've been impacted by substantial airport growth, resulting in continuous flight school training over our neighborhoods, playgrounds, schools, daycares, and Stanley Lake open space. This means enduring frequent and concentrated aircraft circuits almost all day long. This causes persistent noise, lead pollution, and safety concerns for our community. The Community Noise Roundtable, a process outlined by the FAA, was set up to find solutions to address community concerns. However, the CNR has yet to provide solutions and has lacked a representative from Westminster City Council who possesses both a comprehensive understanding of the issue and a genuine interest in the well-being of our citizens. A recent article by the Northern Colorado Center for Investigative Reporting points to unsettling details surrounding the departure of RMMA's director, painting a picture of how our taxpayer-funded efforts and countless community hours put into the CNR have been dismissed and minimized. It's disheartening to witness the wastage of resources within this initiative. The town of Superior have effectively partnered with a law firm. Despite the airport and Jefferson County citing FAA grants limiting action, the law firm's letter outlines actionable measures. It stands in stark contrast to the sentiment often expressed in various forums, implying a lack of agency to address these pressing issues. Engaging with an attorney to develop a plan, rather than processes outlined by the FAA that are designed to fail, would be a more productive approach. Westminster has a history of using legal representation to address airport issues. When RMMA was planning to add commercial aircraft in 1995, Westminster joined Louisville in threatening legal action to stop it, and it worked. There are 2 things this council must do now. Please, stop involvement with the CNR. Instead, divert the money to retain counsel. And demand that the CDPHE bring Dr. Sami Zaran into their plan for community education and serum testing for impacted communities. We expect this education program to begin no later than March 15, 2024. If the CDPHE won't do it, Westminster should take this action on their own. Thank you so much for listening.
The next speaker is Charlene Wiley.
Oh, welcome.
I
am pleased to address this newly formed City Council and look forward to your plan of action for mitigation of the dangers imposed on Westminster residents by Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. Most importantly, we expect you to protect Westminster children from the lifelong effects of lead poisoning from the piston engine aircraft that fly from there. For the past 6 years, I've presented evidence of the harm caused by the daily assault of noise, lead, and other air pollutants from this public facility, and have pleaded with this council to advocate for residents. In August, a scientist provided a chilling presentation on the impact of lead emissions from this airport on Westminster residents to the council. And yet, there is still no educational campaign, let alone lead level testing from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Westminster, or any other authority warning Westminster parents about the potential for lifelong harm to their children from the microparticulate lead being spread on the homes, schools, and playgrounds proximate to this airport. For 6 years, I have instead heard many misunderstandings or false excuses from members of this council, namely, the FAA controls the situation. We are powerless. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is conducting more tests. We have to wait for them to finish their study. My family's fine, so there's no problem with the lead or noise from this airport. The Community Noise Roundtable is the place for us to get action on issues with the airport. These are all not true. The Town of Superior provides a better example of responsible action. They've retained a council that has, in turn, notified Jefferson County of measures that they can take to protect Superior residents. That changed the playing field. Now, Westminster must take similar action to have any hope of achieving equity of action for its own citizens. Just today, Maxine Most, a former Louisville City Council member and representative on the Community Noise Roundtable for Louisville, made a statement after reading the in-depth article published by by Colorado Public Radio on the remarks made by Paul Anslow in a conversation with the head of the Airport Tenant Association. As you should already know, Mr. Anslow described the Community Noise Roundtable as a, quote, waste of time and money for the cities involved. Ms. Most then went on to recommend that Louisville demand return of the dues expended for the CNR, including those allocated in this year for 2024. This seems a logical first step. In addition, we ask that you demand that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment bring Dr. Sammy Zoran, the leading expert on lead emissions from airplanes, into their plan for community education and serum testing for impacted communities. We expect this education program to begin no later than March 15th, 2024. Second, divert money from this useless CNR to retain council, or better yet, join with Town of Superior and its council to play on the new playing field set up for protection of citizens. Thank you.
The next speaker is Emily Brooks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Happy New Year. I hope you're all well rested and recharged and ready to go. I am. I have some comments and I'll get to, but I just want to chime in second. I remember that August conversation about the lead and was shocked. And, once you know, you know. You can't unknow that. And I do think that there's some kind of responsibility. I don't know what that is, but I think as a city, we have a responsibility to ensure the safety of our residents, those within our boundaries. And if we know something may be a hazard to them, what are we doing about it? So thank you, all of you guys, for coming and talking about that tonight. I think it's important. My other comments. I'm happy to see the centralized city recycling facility on the agenda tonight, and delighted that we will be partnering with sustainability. I'm a frequent user of their services and spoke about them when the idea of a centralized site was under discussion. I'm glad to see we'll be leveraging their expertise. I do have a question about composting and offering compost drop-off at the new location. I didn't see this on the list and would like to know if it's under consideration. Especially I think when all the people living in the new downtown and other areas that don't even have the ability to compost outside, it would be useful to them. I also want to comment on the subject of boards and last year's discussion regarding potential changes to how the city engages residents in advising on and participating in projects and policy changes. My recollection of that discussion was that there was a sense that the boards may not be as effective as desired, and maybe a change to topic-specific ad hoc task force teams would be in order. I'd like to offer some thoughts and suggestions on how the existing boards could be better utilized by the council and city leadership. I think we're missing a huge opportunity to better connect the work of council, city leadership, and city staff to these groups. Rather than viewing them as separate from your goals, I think you should view them as key to increasing resident engagement and participation with your strategic goals and objectives, and consider in what way you can provide specific direction and guidance. Many of your largest projects and decisions have a community engagement component, and these groups could be viewed as a partner in those efforts. I have some ideas. Prior to the pandemic, the city hosted naturalization ceremonies with USCIS. I was actually one of the founding project managers for this effort during my time volunteering at Irving Street Library. And we started small in the Irving Street Library community room. We had, I think, maybe 10 or 12 new citizens, and we grew so that we maxed out the capacity at the City Park Recreation Center community room. Those events were well attended, and they're joyous celebrations. Let's look at restarting welcoming new citizens. I think this would be a great project for the Inclusivity Board to take on and fits well with their mission. A couple of items from tonight's agenda might be appropriate to engage the Environmental Advisory Board, and this may already be happening. Specifically, the Centralized Recycling Center and the City Hall Landscape Project. Both of these are key environmental efforts, so it seems like a natural fit. Since you're about to embark on your strategic planning effort, I ask that the board's discussion is revisited and that council looks strategically at the role these teams could play in more direct participation in delivering on your key goals and objectives when the opportunity exists. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
The next speaker is Chris Stimson.
Welcome.
Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, councillors, city manager and staff. I come to you as a late chair of the Environmental Advisory Board to support the proposed recycling centre in Westminster. Before I do, I should make a comment about Mr. Baker's expression that we should combine with other towns around here. I did actually speak at some length with city officials in Broomfield City and County to find out about that, and basically they had no interest in expanding their use of their recycling centre to people who were not residents of Broomfield. I did not talk to Thornton or North Glen or Arvada. My guess is they might have the same kind of attitude in that case. Basically, what Broomfield was saying is, you're Westminster, you handle it yourself. What I have is a letter to the Mayor and City Council, City of Westminster, from the Environmental Advisory Board. The Environmental Advisory Board for the City of Westminster has been briefed on current progress in the task of creating a centralised recycling site for the city. This task has been underway for considerable time and, as we understand it, is now very close to fruition.
The selected site is conveniently close to the new downtown area and will be operated largely indoors by an organization experienced in running such facilities. The facility will take the place of the 4 currently unstaffed sites spread around the city, operation of which is unsatisfactory for many reasons. The new site will be able to handle common recycling, hard to recycle items, and items that can be reused. It'll also have the potential for education and outreach and may in time be able to handle compost delivery. City Council has only to approve the project and it can be operational within 3 or 4 months. It will allow residents with no recycling capability or service to dispose of their common recycling and hard to recycle items without having to travel out of town, as I've had to do to Boulder before now. Members of the Environmental Advisory Board are very pleased to have been made aware of the state of this project, which will represent a useful and practical service for Westminster residents, and we urge City Council to approve its completion without delay, December 18th, 2023, and signed by all members of the Environmental Advisory Board. Thank you.
The next speaker is Bill Baraya.
Welcome.
Welcome, City Council. First of all, I'd like to say that I think 5 minutes to let people talk at these presentations is way too small. You let a scientist come and talk to you for a couple hours, and he was very convincing. But I think there's community members here that could give you more insight to what you're than 5 minutes when they come up here haphazardly and trying to get their points across. So why don't you consider having another meeting where you have a representative from the community come in and talk to you with their facts and figures that they all have studied over these years. Let me tell you something that I have gone to almost every single community roundtable, and the last one I went to, I laid out some figures that I challenged them to come back to me and tell me whether I'm right or wrong. Do you know that was 3 weeks ago? Never got an answer back because I guess that they think that my figures were right. Let me give you some facts about this airport out here. 300,000 flights this year. Of the 300,000 flights, the previous airport director said 60,000 or 60% were general aviation and flight schools. That's completely wrong. It is not. We're really looking at 90% general aviation and flight schools. If his figures were right, we would have 16 jets or 20 jets a day over 16 hours a day flying over our area. That's not right. I could stand out in my area in Green Knolls and tell you that I do not get 20 jets a day flying over my area. So when I tell you that we have 90% general aviation and flight schools, and they don't fly, the flight schools don't fly in bad weather or when it's snowing, they don't fly. So that means it's concentrated a lot more. Every day out there, there's like 5 flight school planes flying over with the noise. Their master plan in 2011 was to have 255,000 flights by 2030. Right now we're at 300,000. How many more in the next 5-6 years are we going to have flying over our area? I have some goals here that I'd like to have you consider. One is reduce the flight schools, or at least their operations. Get the Department of Health to come out here and do a study on lead. Every one of the previous people have said that. You know, it's not that hard for these pilots that have piston engines to change to unleaded gas. It's not that hard. They have to get a certificate and put a single page in their flight manual. That's it. They've all been certified. Also, CDOT did a study a few years ago and said that this airport was $300 million as far as the economic impact to this area. What about the negatives? Lower house prices? There's people that have already moved out of our area because of the airport. How about the noise that people have to endure? People aren't buying houses as fast in this area because they hear the airports. In fact, our neighbors that just moved in said they would have never bought the house if they had gone out on the patio and listened to the noise from the airport. Let's eliminate, or have the council suggest they eliminate the noise roundtable. The consultants out there were paid $25,000 to do something what you or I could come up with after 10 minutes of studying the flight patterns. The answer is not moving the flights from one community to another. How about the Rocky Mountain Airport start charging landing fees? You know, just because the previous director said that he wouldn't do it, that doesn't mean they couldn't do it. They should charge landing fees. Need our Westminster City Council member that represents the airport to support the community instead of agreeing with everything the airport throws out. Should not disagree with the scientist that gave you a presentation. What training does he have to disagree with the scientist? 400 people showed up to hear the Colorado
Mr.
Attorney
Baraya,
General.
thank you for your comments. I'm sorry, but our
We need
time
your
is up.
ear and support and no pushback. Thank you.
That's the last speaker I had signed up.
Okay. And we have 4 voicemails. Right.
Hi there, my name is Caitlin Drake, and I'm calling about the potential change to the recycling at Westview. I think that would be really detrimental. Those bins are used all the time. I live in countryside, and I acknowledge that not everyone is particularly responsible with breaking down boxes or putting in things that don't belong. But to be honest, that's only going to really get worse if they go away, because I guarantee most of the people who drive there are not going to drive to another facility for recycling, myself included. And most of the people probably won't pay for or cannot pay for recycling to come to their home. I mean, we don't really have room to keep another giant container to deliver recycling, and I'm not sure what we will do if those bins go away. Not to mention, through our neighborhood already, there's about a bazillion trash and recycling trucks at all hours of the day, and that's only going to increase, like, traffic down our streets, wear and tear on our roads. And even if, okay, maybe the trucks are there anyway, they're going to be stopping more. That's going to impact traffic. Neighborhood roads are not wide enough to have multiple trash trucks driving up and down, stopping at every house. If this were a measure or a change being put into place because the city was looking into municipal options for trash and recycling, I think that would feel a lot different. But given how expensive it already is to pay for trash service, adding recycling, I think most people just wouldn't do. And most of that would just end up in the trash. So I would really encourage you to please keep this site open. I don't think changing it to a different location with limited hours would be helpful for anyone. Or please look into municipal options for our community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Crystal Van Acker. I live in Countryside, and we really utilize the recycle bins over at Westview Rec Center, and we'd be disappointed to have them moved from that area. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, my name is Michael Harding, and I'm calling in regards to the recycling issue that we've got going on. And I think taking away the recycling center at the rec center would be a step backwards for trying to push people to recycle and making things easier for the community. So I don't think that would improve anything. Thank you. Bye.
My name is Andre Dion. I'm a Westminster citizen, and I see that council is considering closing the recycle center at Westview Rec Center and putting one in another location. I strongly urge you to not close the current center, even if you do create a new one in that other location. Colorado already does a miserable job of recycling, and we need to do everything we can to make it easier, not harder, for citizens to recycle. The bins at Westview fill up regularly, demonstrating that they are well used. Closing it down will just reduce the amount of recycling that people do and unnecessarily put much more material in landfill. Again, please do not close this valuable service. Thank you.
That was the final voicemail.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the city manager's report. Oh, yeah. Was there anybody else before we move on to the city manager's report that wanted to speak but did not get signed up? Okay. Yeah, come on up. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I think I just need to state my name. Is that correct? Tom Lampo. Okay. It's good to be back in front of Westminster. Happy New Year to everyone. 2024 will be an exciting year. And as we enter the new year, we should expect to see God work in our lives. Please remember that cities can influence counties, which can influence the state, which can influence our nation. We can get our nation back on track, and it can start here. So please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, in Jesus Christ's victorious name, Westminster is your city, and you are welcome here. We need your presence, wisdom, and leadership. You're God, and no one is above you. In Job 42:2, it states, I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. Help us to rest in the comfort of knowing you already have the victory of the spiritual battle, and situations are playing out so more people will see that you are the living God who loves all people. We know there can be difficult situations ahead of us, but grant us your comfort. We are your people. I want to lift up our elected council. Right here is where big change can take place. Each of them has a lot of responsibility. Their decisions can be difficult. Give each member wisdom to make the correct decisions and strength to carry out that decision. Let them rely on you and never forget what is written in Jeremiah 32:17. O Lord God, you yourself made the heavens and the earth by your great power and with your outstretched arm. Nothing is too difficult for you. You, the creator of all, can assist in the city's decisions. Help them to rely on you and guide them. All things are important to you. No decision they have before them is too small for you to care about or too large for you to not know what is right. You have placed them in their position for a reason. Ultimately, their decisions can be a light. And Matthew 5:15 states, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Their decisions can be a light to influence a country, a state, a nation. Please grant them the wisdom and strength to carry out your will. Lord, I lift up all members of the city of Westminster to you. In Isaiah 41:13, your word states, for I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. As we enter into 2024, we need you to take hold of us and lead us. Show us how to trust in you and not to look at our circumstances with fear, but with optimism and faith that you are in control and will be our provider. You are Jehovah Jireh, and it is the name we call on to provide for us. Jehovah Jireh is the Lord my provider. Jehovah Jireh, be our provider. In your precious and holy name we pray. Amen. Thank you and have a nice night.
Okay, let me just confirm that. Is there anyone else who want up? Welcome.
Hi, I'm a Westminster resident as well. I was inspired by the other people who spoke about the airport today.
Sir, I'm sorry. Can you state your name, please?
Oh, Jason Farbman. So, as a resident, I don't think you can picture how many planes and how often they are unless you live in one of these areas. I mean, we're talking every time I step out my door, there's a piston engine aircraft above our house. or within a couple hundred feet. And these aircraft aren't flying high. I mean, they're maybe 300 to 700 feet above your house. I think they're supposed to be higher, but there are times where you just look up and you're like, oh my God, this is right here. And, you know, you can check an app and see where they are. And, you know, they're like 400 feet sometimes, 500, 600. So it's just really low, right over you. You try to walk around the neighborhood. It's just constant. I remember a beautiful day this fall, met up with some friends in the neighborhood to walk to the playground with our kids, and you couldn't even talk to people outside. It was just so many planes at the same time all around the playground. And this is about 2 aeronautical miles from the airport. So we're not talking, I'm not hearing takeoff noise, I'm not hearing landing noise. I'm hearing noise of them just looping right over our neighborhood about 2 miles from the airport. This is something that you don't anticipate when you live about 2 miles from an airport to hear. It's just over and over. So I would encourage City Council on a nice, beautiful, sunny day, go to Countryside, go to Westbrook, go to King Soopers, 100th, just stand there. Just see how often it is. It's just constant. And, you know, if we don't think of our kids and think of how they're affected by this, you know, what's the point of living in Westminster? So, thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else who would like to come up? Come on up. Welcome.
My name is Carol Gosenheimer. I live in Countryside. And I just want to maybe quantify a little bit more about the airplane traffic. So the way the training schools operate is they operate in an oval, starting from the airport, going over Superior or Broomfield, depending on which side, and then they loop over Countryside. And I just moved in 6 months ago from out of state, and I was not informed of my navigation easement or this airport by the sellers or the real estate agents. And much to my dismay, I was extremely upset when I found that any peace and quiet in the neighborhood is pretty much impossible. During the summer months, I have complained dozens of times to the airport. They will not respond to complaints for the most part. I begged and begged and begged and finally got a call from the PIO where they basically explained with every sentence that we can't. Well, we know from the Superior lawsuit or letter from their counsel that, in fact, they can. There are many things that the airport can do to abate some of this noise. So, for example, when I was taking account of the airplanes as I was trying to sit in my yard, I noticed that the flights were starting at 4:30 a.m. this summer. That is because there are so many flight schools that they need to start early in order to accommodate all the pilots that want to get up and run circles around our neighborhoods to get their training hours in. We understand that this is really not an effective way to train. You don't want a pilot that has done 15 hours of loops on the same airport. And not only were they going 17 hours, but I was counting between 12 and 20 seconds between planes coming overhead. This is intolerable noise. We had zero quiet. So one plane is coming and another one is on its tail, so you have zero quiet for 17 hours. So one of the things that we consider, our children are important, there's lead, but there's also noise pollution, and that hasn't been brought up so much. So I want to talk about what happens when you have noise pollution. And we're talking sometimes 60 to 80 decibels. This is an exponential rate of increase in noise. So the problems related to noise include stress-related illnesses, high blood pressure, speech interference, hearing loss, sleep disruption, lost productivity, respiratory agitation, racing pulse, high blood pressure, stroke, headache, and in case of extremely loud, constant noise, gastritis, colitis, and even heart attacks. So this is what the citizens of our city are facing from this airport. So I hope that you will consider all of the things that have been said tonight, and I hope that Westminster will start to stand up to this airport and stand up for the citizens of our community so that we can be healthy, happy, and enjoy our lives here. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who's come up to speak. Are there any more community members that would like to come up? Okay. All right. We will move on to the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, ladies and gentlemen in attendance, and anybody who might be watching online. We're going to run through a couple slides here just with some things that are going on in the city. First of all, as we start out the new year, just want to share some of the key projects and programs that will be initiated here in 2024. So if you look at the graphic over to the right, you can see the number of projects and programs that will be initiated by each of the various departments around the city. But I wanted to highlight a few. So Project Stratford Park expansion at the Sheridan Green facility, that community discussion and planning on how we move forward will continue. The drinking water facility project continues through design. Replacement municipal court project will begin design. We'll be looking at our city website and how to update that to a better standard. And as the gentleman mentioned this evening, anything beyond about 3 clicks and people get frustrated and they give up. So we need to streamline that website. Starting construction on the Center Park in downtown Westminster, and then very, very much anticipated opening up that food market hall in downtown Westminster. Excited about that. From a programming perspective, implementing new emergency vehicle preemption system in the city to improve our response times by changing intersection lights and timing as emergency vehicles move across our city. Developing a school zone and a traffic calming policy, and continuing work on our wellness court navigator and grant program as that stands up. So some exciting projects and programs for 2024. We look forward to keeping the community informed as we move forward working each of those. Next slide, please. City update. Just as a reminder for the community, the council will host a town hall. It's Thursday, January 18th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's at College Hill Library. If you'd like to ask a question and have the council respond to that, show up a little bit early so you can fill out one of the questionnaire cards and submit that. If anybody wants to watch the meeting, it will be on our city's YouTube channel and also on our Facebook page. And then when it's done, we will make sure that that gets posted on social media afterwards. So again, January 18th, that's a Thursday evening. Next slide. And then just an update on our police department citizen review board. So we have internal affairs investigations in our police department, but they have 2 review components. So first is an internal supervisory review that's conducted by the police department, but then we also have a citizen review board, and that's obviously made up with members from the community. So we have 2 community members that make up that citizen review board. One is selected by the personnel board, the other is selected by the city manager. And Roberta Bourne, she was our city manager selection from August of 2017, and she just completed her term in December of 2023. She'll be departing. We're appreciative of her service and commitment to our community. And then Miguel Mendoza Hall has been selected to replace Roberta beginning here in January 2024. And he's been part of our Chiefs Community Advisory Panel and the city's Inclusivity Board. And so we welcome Mr. Mendoza Hall to that effort. Next slide. Some Westie wins. I thought this was great news for our community. The recreation programming that the city offers continues to be top-notch. And our 2023 recreation revenues exceeded our budget expectations. So that second bullet shows revenues coming in by mid-December. It wasn't a year-end closeout, but it was the last good numbers that we had before this meeting, and that was just shy of $6 million, which exceeded the budget projection of $5.3 million. So good news, and appreciate all the hard work that our recreation staff members do to provide those programs and services to our community, and certainly all the community members that take advantage of those programs. Next slide. Westy Winds, as the mayor mentioned, we hosted prior to the holidays 2023 Santa Cops. We were able to help 151 children, 62 distinct families who may not have otherwise had a Christmas in 2023, and there were 1,500 gifts wrapped. And if you look at the right, you can see a couple photos of the police training room with those 1,500 gifts that were racked and set aside distinctly by recipient. Quite impressive, and we certainly appreciate all those who donated to the Santa Cops program this year, all the volunteers who wrapped, and most importantly to our police department for hosting such a noble effort in our community. Next slide. Some things to know: Planning Commission meeting Tuesday, tomorrow evening, 7 to 10 p.m. here in City Council chambers. Inclusivity Board meeting, that goes Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. That's a hybrid meeting up in the CMO conference room or via Teams. The Parks, Rec, Libraries, and Open Space Advisory Board meeting is Thursday, January 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. Downstairs in the multipurpose room. Our city administrative offices will be closed on Monday, January 15th in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The Special Permits and License Board meeting is next Wednesday, the 17th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. here in Council Chambers. As mentioned, our City Council Town Hall is Thursday, January 18th, 6:30 to 8 p.m., College Hill Library. And then we have a team building event with the City Council on Saturday, January 20th, 8 to 3, again at College Hill Library. And then finally, our next City Council meeting will be Monday, January 22nd, beginning at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom, and then picking up afterwards for the formal meeting here in Council Chambers. Next slide. Information-only items, we had one tonight, and that was on the Freed Up American Rescue Plan Act funds as we closed out quarter four in 2023. Happy to answer any questions that there may be on that. Next slide. And then encourage everybody to, let me see something. Yep. And then I want to encourage everybody to reach out and contact us. The city staff and certainly the council want to be accessible, responsive, transparent, accountable. We've got my phone number listed there, 303-658-2006. Some of the speakers who have spoken tonight have contacted me via phone, or they've contacted me by the email address listed. Certainly responsive when you do contact me. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on X. You can check us out on Instagram, or you can ring our bell at Nextdoor. And then just as a reminder, thank you for sending that. We have coordinated for CDPHE to come speak with the council in a study session on March 4th. And they're currently finishing up, to some of the folks that were in attendance tonight, finishing up a study on the effects of lead, what's a dangerous level, what's not. I'm by no means an expert, so I'm looking forward to hearing that presentation. But they're finishing that up, and they'll come answer questions in a study session format, Q&A with the council. So I think that's a positive step forward. We had tried to get them to come in the summertime, and they were not available. But the mayor and I met with Representative Byrd, who was able to help facilitate that. And so I shared that note with the council before the holidays, and they followed up. And so we've gotten that scheduled. So that's a good news for the community. Penny, any questions? That's all I have this evening.
Councilor DeMott.
I just have one question on the ARPA funds. So there was an amount left, and so prior council, actually, I think it's really probably over 2 different councils, and this is the 3rd one that those dollars have come in front of, made some decisions about what to do with that money. And so I saw that there's a balance of $2+ million. Is there going to be opportunity for us to talk about what we do with that? I know in the past we, one of the specific ones I saw on there that I I'm particularly glad we did was additional roads, and it was nice to actually see the highlight of which roads that impacted. So I'm just curious, will there be an opportunity to talk about what we're going to do with the remainder of the ARPA funds?
Now, always an opportunity. I would, my understanding is there's some projects that still have some follow-up and expenditures to be completed, but Mr. Parlow could speak specifically to that.
Yeah, good evening, Council. Michael Parlow, Policy and Budget Coordinator. Councilor DeMont, there may be some remaining funds at the end. However, I think the majority of what you're seeing in that $2 million is the Parks Irrigation and Water Conservation Project. And that actually is moving towards 100% design and will be bid out in early 2024. And construction will begin in the summer for that. So unsure exactly how much would be remaining from that project.
Before that moves forward, will we be able to see that design so we understand the impact and make sure that it still aligns with our goals? That would be my only ask. Otherwise,
how
that
much it
makes
costs?
sense.
Because when I was kind of upset with how we spent the money, because I thought that money was supposed to be spent for the people from COVID. So I didn't see much money spent for the people, but I would hope that some of the money can be spent maybe to give rebates for water rates or something
Well,
like that.
and that, just from my recollection, and staff could correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand your point of view on it. I think that what the city was wise in doing during that time, which I think I'm the only one who's left that was here through that mess of COVID, it was they were able to utilize our, call it rainy day fund in our reserves, and we were able to backfill that reserve. So the money wasn't necessarily tied to that because we used our reserves for that. And so then that ARPA funds made our reserve whole. Is that accurate?
So yes, we utilized, we call them freed up because we utilized the option to pay back ourselves for public health and safety payroll for 2020 during the beginning of the pandemic. So we were able to take that $4.5 million
And the other thing I would just mention, just as somebody who was here that I'm particularly proud of, is that we took some of that money and used it for bonuses for first responders, because we certainly saw, well, one, those folks were out and oftentimes by themselves working in cars, and we lost a lot of people just through the unrest of what happened over those couple of years. So there was some stuff that we were able to do that was actually evaluated and implemented into certain funds that weren't originally what we were going to spend the money on.
Okay, thank you for that, clearing that up.
And, Mayor and Councilor Hott, do you have any questions?
I do. This is Mayor McNally. I shared with the council just as soon as I knew that January 20th, I cannot attend. And I have heard nothing from leadership or anyone about being able to maybe change that. We aren't doing strategic planning until the end of February. So I just have to share my disappointment. Thanks.
Do you have a thought about that, Mr. Freitag?
I'm happy if the council chooses to forego that or postpone it. You're certainly welcome to do that. I'm just, we've got it scheduled, it's planned, but if you want to move it, we can certainly do that. We do have a town hall on the 18th. We could do the same with that, but it's really up to the council to provide that direction.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we either change the date or cancel it for Nancy's sake.
I also had a question, but do we make a motion?
I don't
to
think
do
you
that?
need a motion
Okay.
for that.
All right.
It's okay. Mayor, when would be an opportunity where you would be able to participate in person or virtually or in some way for that type of session?
I think anytime I have to get through January, and then I from his indications, He didn't take me away from the town hall, but he knows that's 90 minutes. He knew this was an all-day piece, and he just said, I wouldn't have the stamina. As of today, I believe it. So I just have to go with the counsel I'm getting, and I gave that to council and staff as soon as I knew that. I think it's critical. I don't have to be there, but I know how critical it is to get to know one another and to understand how we all process. And me running the meetings, that's just critical for me. So I think anytime after the 1st of April and 1st of February, and I can double check with him Thursday because he's taking out the rest of my stitches, and I will see him face to face to just ask that question.
Okay. Councillor Hott, let me just check with you. Do you have any comments?
This is time for councillor comments, yes?
Oh, no, not yet. We're just at this point discussing the timing of the the team building. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to, if we can, make sure that the mayor can participate.
Others?
My 2 cents is I think that it would be a big miss if not all of us were able to participate. We all bring different worldviews and life experiences. The mayor brings a wealth of knowledge of her many, many decades of service to both the city and other community organizations. And so I feel like it would be a miss if it's not something we couldn't reevaluate.
Councillor Zadi.
I agree. There's no rush. I mean, we can do this in February. I don't think we need to do this in January.
So I also agree it would be great if we can reschedule it. So if we could hear from our facilitator to see if there are any dates in February.
We'll see what we can coordinate.
Okay, I appreciate it. Any other questions for Mr. Freitag?
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could, just to close the loop, I think the ARPA fund discussion, we had not yet heard from the mayor or Councillor Hott as to whether they had any input onto the ARPA fund discussion before moving on to the council comments portion of today's agenda.
Mayor or Councillor Hott, did you have any comments on the ARPA fund? I'm taking that as a no.
I know the community has wondered where all that money went, so as long as we can truly show where it is, what we have left, what's going to happen to it, and council needs to be involved in that discussion. It doesn't need to be brought to us by staff. Maybe staff needs to listen to it. Our thoughts are first and then come back to us. I don't, it's just my thought.
Councillor Hott?
I don't have anything else to add.
I did have one question for you, Mr. Freitag, regarding the town hall that's upcoming on the 18th. You mentioned for those who have questions to arrive early to provide those. Is it possible for those that may be attending virtually to submit their questions prior to the 18th?
Yes, we'll ensure there's a link on social media as that announcement goes out.
Okay, thank you.
I would just ask that you also have that emailed to council so we can put it on our socials too and at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to City Council comments. And I don't know, do we have a way for, I'll just start with, let me start online first. Councillor Hott, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to say that the comments that the former RMMA director, Mr. Anslow said, it's not representative of all of us and how we think. I think that it makes sense that jet fuel may be harmful because we already know that lead in fuel is harmful. That's why our automobile fuel has been unleaded for many years. I also think that the request for community education from our residents is a reasonable request, and I would like to follow through with that. I can only speak for myself, but I believe this is a serious issue, and it shouldn't be ignored. I've read about the studies in Superior, and I think about the lead that they found in windowsills every time I open one of my windows or drink tea from the herbs that came from my backyard. And I think we should want to find out how this is affecting the health of our community and our kids. And I would like to follow the example of Superior so we can find a way to make a difference for our residents in this area. And that's what I'd like to say. Thanks.
And Mayor?
Well, first, I know, Councillor DeMott, you took a beating tonight with people thinking you haven't represented us. You have, in times where there was not one single other councillor that could take that night and do it, and you continue to stand there. And it isn't just your thoughts. You come back so well and share with us what's going on. So I appreciate that. But to Mr. Frankel, I too would like to know whatever Superior's doing and some other of the cities, what does that mean? What should we be thinking of, and what are the risks for the city if we do or we don't? I don't know those things, and so we need your input as to what some of these lawyers are writing on the other cities' behalfs.
Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. I have a question and then a comment. Can you update us, City Manager Freitag, on the payment structure that we're paying for CNR and when that's due?
Councilor, I honestly don't remember what the amount is and what the payment structure is, so.
I heard it's $13,000 a year. So if anyone wants to tell me any different.
Well, we've talked about it on council a few times as to timing, and I'm sure someone on staff can remember.
I don't have it off the top of my head, nor do I remember when we get invoiced, but I can verify that and get back with council.
Follow up.
Sure. So my comments are related to, obviously this issue has been, so since I've been on council, it's been number 2 probably the most talked about from the community. And, you know, this council in 2022 left CNR because we thought it was dysfunctional, it was unproductive, and all the various things that are now kind of coming to light once again. We came back to the CNR because, quite frankly, so the director came here, made a case, pitched us, we trusted him, that the money that we pay to be part of that roundtable would be beneficial, we can have a voice. And from my standpoint, the reason why I voted yes on that was because the community said, Obi, we still need a voice, right? So the community needs a voice. So you guys not being on that roundtable, it takes that away from us. But now, so fast forward time, we see the director himself. I mean, this audio is disgusting. I'm really angry about it, what he has said about residents, what he said about the members of the roundtable, that it's a useless, that we, the city, we're wasting our money as being part of it. He said this on audio. It's right there. And my opinion is, I don't think we should be wasting our money anymore. I think we need to leave the roundtable as fast as we can. They know what we need. We've voiced our voices to them. They know exactly where we stand. And I think it's not in our control from a county standpoint. It's not in our control from a FAA standpoint. So there really is no longer a purpose that I can see still remaining in paying them thousands of dollars to be part of a roundtable that is not doing anything for us. So I would like to make a motion, if I need a motion, to lead the roundtable tonight. If I have a second.
it. I'll second that.
Let me hear from.
So if I could, Mayor Pro Tem, I think it would be preferable to agendize this vote on the next meeting so that it can be noticed publicly. And the council's desire and the clerk to ensure that there is an agenda item on your next regular meeting.
Okay, that sounds like a good path forward.
That's fair. Thank you.
Councilor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you to everybody who came and spoke tonight. I appreciate more than anything people using their First Amendment rights to come and say, frankly, whatever the hell they want. So with that being said, I was one of the leading voices who said that we should leave the round table when we left it. And my belief was that things weren't getting done. However, despite his heinous comments from former Director Anslow, there is a path laid out by the FAA, not former Director Anslow, that says the Community Noise Roundtable is the place to address noise issues with an airport. That is why I agreed to go back, and I still think that that's the right thing. And my reasoning for thinking that's the right thing is the same reason why I decided that we were wrong to leave it. It's because all the other affected community members, if you have one community who leaves that roundtable, the rest of them aren't going to be listened to by the FAA, because that's the way the FAA sets up the Community Noise Roundtable. I do want to also address some items or assertions that were made here tonight that somehow, just because we're in the Noise Roundtable, that this council has been sitting on its hands and not doing anything else. The things that you heard tonight from the city manager, as far as meeting with our state delegation, we've talked to our federal delegation, we've been hounding CDPHE, quite frankly, to get them to come and talk to us. We did have a scientist come and talk. And yes, I have some disagreement with what he said, just because, not necessarily the science, but because he also lives in Rock Creek, and he admitted, while he was here, that noise was his original reason that he was curious about the Rocky Mountain Airport. The other thing is, I'll remind folks, and I've shared this before, I live very, very close to the airport. I'm half a mile away from 108th, off of Johnson and 108th. I've lived in that neighborhood my entire life, give or take a couple years when I went away to college. So I do understand what it is, and I will tell you that there's various different views on the airport. Some people really like the airplanes. Some people really don't like the airplanes. I can assure you that members of this council hear both sides of it. And I just say that not to belittle the concerns of the community, but we've shared the same concerns, especially around lead. And that's the reason that we had our city staff hounding CDPHE. However, I'm a firm believer that you got to work all avenues with all partners. We're going to get things done further if we try to play nice with the people who actually have the ability to do things. There is a time and a place where you have to go a different route. And I think that the all-pass approach is really actually has brought some fruit. It hasn't been as fast as we want. It hasn't been as fast as the community wants. But I will tell you some of the changes that came out of some of our neighboring communities with the airport, with the flight schools, such as recommending that they use certain runways past 10 o'clock. I've noticed the difference. I spend a lot of time outside. My wife and I have a hot tub. We sit in it regularly, and I can tell you past 10 o'clock, there are less airplanes. Are there still airplanes? Sure there are. We live next to an airport. And I'm not saying that to be flippant, but it's just the reality of when you buy a house that close to an airport, you're going to hear airplanes. So I hope that folks understand that nobody on this council, and certainly I don't believe anybody on the CNR, wants anything but trying to make progress that are going to make people pleased with what's going on, try to address the safety concerns. I would say that the fact that Director Anslow is the former director says something about, obviously, we aren't alone in being upset with what he said. So with that being said, I'm one voice of the council. I'm going to continue to support our efforts because I think it's what's right for our partners, and certainly Could it be easier for me to not have to go to those meetings and have people come here and think that I'm not doing a good job? That sounds like an easier path. So I hope you take that into consideration when I say I think that the right thing to do is continue to participate in the CNR, continue to put pressure on CDPHE, continue to work with our state and our federal delegation to see what we can't get done.
I just want to, honestly, the points that Councilor Azadi and that Councilor Demott just made, I think are, we have been talking about the airport and what is the best route to have an impact on what we're hearing from the community and their concerns. And we've gone back and forth on how is that best approached. And I think there's three things that we're hearing. One is, the noise impacts, and for us to have an impact and a voice in that, I think it is useful to stay on the CNR and maintain any improvements that we can achieve and any analyses that are ongoing with that to improve flight paths and timeframes and to keep putting pressure on that process. We are also hearing, for sure, and recognize the impacts from the lead. And I think continuing to put pressure on CDPHE to do the analysis so that we can understand what is that impact on our residents. Not just what are the safe levels, but let's go get the analysis and see what those, what's out there. So I think we need to continue that path as well. And just the last thing I'm hearing is that I wonder about the disclosures for residents. And I think this is part of an education process, but I know that when you're purchasing a home, there should be disclosures of if there's navigation easement, that should be something that's provided at closing. But is there a different additional disclosure that can be made in this area that we might have an impact on? So it shouldn't be a surprise when somebody's moving in that there is airport noise, there are lead impacts, or just flights occurring over their home and their neighborhood. So that's, yeah, go ahead, Councilor Allen.
Well, thanks for all the things that have been said, but as a resident of 37 years, when I moved here, that was a commuter jet airport. There wasn't all these flights going on. Now we have JSX flying out of there, like commercial-sized jets. My husband saw him when he took my grandkids sledding at Christmas over the rec center, flying low and loud. I mean, it's increased exponentially in the last few years. And where can we go back to something reasonable? And Superior wouldn't be suing if they were being heard. So apparently they're not being heard at this roundtable, or they wouldn't be suing. So we, as representatives of the citizens, need to listen to the citizens and figure out how we can best help them solve the problem.
I'm gonna just check with Councilor Hott or the mayor. Do you have additional comments? No? Okay.
No.
Councilor Jamont?
If we continue in the roundtable or whether we don't, I would challenge every member of this body to go actually sit through some of those meetings. And I would disagree with the assertion that they're not being heard. Sometimes being heard doesn't mean that you get what you're asking for. And it's more difficult than just changing things. I mean, it's a complicated issue. And there are a lot of different entities who have control over it, and it's a difficult issue.
Councilor Azadi?
Just to confirm, we are agendizing this for next time? Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could, just got a text from staff that the dues, to answer Councilor Azadi's question about the dues for 2024 for the CNR roundtable participation are $3,600, and they're due on April 1st. Okay?
Thank you. And I lost where we were. I think that concludes our city council comments. Yeah, okay. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to approve consent agenda items 8A through 8B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's vote.
Councillor Carmelia.
Yes.
Councillor Demott.
Yes.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Councillor Hott.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Normella.
Yes.
And Councillor Ireland.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
Okay. We have no appointments and resignations, so we'll move on to public hearings and other new business. Item 10A, first reading of the Council Bills Number 1, vacating a portion of the West 88th Avenue. Do we have a motion? Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to pass Councilor Bill Number 1 on first reading, vacating a portion of West 88th Avenue right away within the Westminster subdivision.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Are there any comments? Councilor Demott?
I just have a quick question. So I think I understand what's going to happen with this, but can you tell us why that, just so the public understands, because there was comment about this, exactly why they're having that portion vacated and what it will be used for?
Yeah, we'll ask our city engineer to explain the details.
Certainly, great question, Councilor Lamont. So yes, there are two portions of right-of-way being vacated tonight. Part of that is just to get the right section of the 88th Avenue, in this case on 10A, identified, which I think is 0.053 acres, very small kind of sliver. The street section, they're actually still dedicating quite a bit of right-of-way on their side of the property and then building out a full section of roadway. So it's really just create a complete street from Lowell all the way to Federal.
Does us helping with that help them with the sidewalk design so that you have better accessible sidewalks and roadway and such?
Correct, yeah, we get 6-foot tree lawn plus 10-foot sidewalk detached. It allows us access to maintain both.
Okay, that's what I thought that it did, but I just want to make sure I understood. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, thanks.
I understood that it made the road narrower there. Is that true?
Councilor Island, thank you for your question. The answer is no. The right-of-way section stays exactly the same from curb to curb. Thanks.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Councillor Demott.
Yes.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Councillor Hott.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Normella.
Yes.
Councillor Ireland.
No.
And Councillor Carmelia.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
All right, do we have a motion for item B, which is first reading of Councilor's Bill Number 2 regarding vacating portions of West 84th Avenue and Lowell Boulevard? Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to pass Councilor Bill Number 2 on first reading, vacating portions of West 84th Avenue and Lowell Boulevard rights of way within the Observatory addition to Westminster subdivision.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, let's move to a roll call.
Councillor Azadi.
Yes.
Councillor Hott.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Councillor Normella.
Yes.
Councillor Ireland.
No.
Councillor Carmelia.
Yes.
And Councillor Demott.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
I think we're going to take a quick bio break before we go into item C, which, does that sound good? I know. All right, are we ready to resume? And we're going to start with item C, a presentation and a resolution for authorizing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement and sublease agreement to establish a centralized drop-off recycling site. And looks like we have Mr. Lindsay to provide us with the presentation.
I'm sorry, can I just check and make sure that the mayor and Councilor Hott are still on?
Yes, I am.
This is Councilor Hott.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. My name is Chris Lindsay. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'm pleased to be here this evening to talk to you about a centralized drop-off recycling site. We're going to provide some information to you tonight over a few slides to give some information about the action that's before you. I want to talk briefly about the current program, the proposed program, a brief comparison, discussion of budget and cost, and then next steps through this process. I think many of you have seen these photos before, but the city's current recycling program involves 4 decentralized and unstaffed community recycling sites at Fire Station 1, the Westminster Municipal Court, the Municipal Services Center, and Westview Recreation Center. And yes, that's a boat on the upper left-hand side. The current recycling program, we have really those unstaffed, unfenced, open 24 hours a day sites. We regularly have material that exceeds the bin capacity. We have recycling bins that are contaminated with goods that are not recyclable. We have illegal dumping. The city cleans these. We contract to clean these on a daily basis. And they have, on windy days, they contaminate the neighborhoods around them, and we're cleaning those up as well, but we receive numerous complaints. On the upper right-hand photo, that's what was actually a dumpster fire at the recycling site that's at the Westminster Municipal Court. We added this comparison with other cities after some of the questions that came across email following the publication of the packet, just to share a little bit about our program and how it compares with those around us. Our 4 sites, when the rest of these have 1, there's a mixed bag in terms of staffed or unstaffed, fenced, gated, or not fenced and gated. And then you'll see, a bit of difference there with the other items accepted, but there is quite a bit of hard to recycle, yard waste, and those items. So this evening we bring to you a lease for a facility that would allow us to have a centralized location for the city's recycling program. This is located off 91st Avenue across from the Westminster downtown, adjacent to the Costco location. That's a 10-minute drive for 80% of Westminster residents. And when we previously spoke with City Council, having a centralized location was really a top priority for the council. We're really proud to be able to talk about a proposed recycling program that's done and operated by Sustainability Recycling. You might know them for the facility they have operated in Arvada. This is a photo of that site. Assuming we move forward with this program, the site would be open Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Friday and Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and closed on Sunday. We would accept common recycling at no charge, and we would expand our program to offer 35 plus or minus hard to recycle and reuse items that could have a charge depending upon what those items are. This allows us to offer educational programming because there's staff on the site. There are grant opportunities once you have a hard facility. And this would also allow us to close those existing drop-off sites located in the 4 locations around the city. I think this hits on many of the items I've mentioned. I do want to highlight a few, though. The current recycling program, there's those bins that are picked up on a daily basis. With the proposed centralized site, there would be a compactor, and we could get by with potentially 3 to 5 pickups per week, so limited truck traffic at one site. Certainly minimal contamination of trash that's in the recycling stream because it would be staffed and there would be folks there to assist in recycling those items. Again, we would allow hard to recycle and reuse items through programming with sustainability recycling. And again, there are state rebate opportunities and grant opportunities by having a hard facility that the city can invest in. Briefly, the budget. So currently the city spends around $188,000 a year to allow for pickup of recycling, site cleanup, and then we have some hard to recycle and hazardous waste disposal because of items that are hazardous that get dropped on the existing sites. Moving forward, this facility, with the lease being the primary cost, would be certainly an increase in cost up to around $265,000, but with a much higher level of service and certainly a cleaner and safer community to go with it. That really concludes my presentation. I think there will be a number of questions which I'm happy to address. The next steps for staff, certainly the action tonight, we're requesting you approve a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute a lease. Following that, we would work to execute a service agreement with Sustainability Recycling to operate the site. We would commence with a transition communication plan. We would complete tenant improvements, and I'm happy to say that we're projecting to open later this spring at the site if we approve. Thank you.
All right, we do have questions. I will check with Councilor Hott. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Mayor, do you have any questions?
The only thing that is a huge piece that I see, not about the recycling center, but for people getting there, coming off of 92nd, they have that short, I swear it's either 1/8 of a street block or whatever and it's not well marked. People, it's a danger zone. I know people don't understand it, so I just go so slow so I don't get hit. But with the way that whole intersection's set up, and they have to be in the far right-hand lane to go on through to get to this place, and if they go straight, they're going to be going to downtown Westminster. So that signage will be critical. People understanding that horrible intersection will be critical so that we don't have accidents every day.
Councilor DeMont?
I did have a question about signage. So for if any of my stuff was in the presentation, I apologize. Well, actually, I'm going to start with my presentation question. How come this wasn't brought back in a study session? Typically, we'd see this. I was surprised we asked for it to come back, but for it to come back for a vote with the presentation kind of caught me off guard.
So our staff is really working to get this implemented as fast as possible.
Clearly.
That's really what this is. It's a priority for staff to get those existing sites that are eyesores closed and move forward.
Well, I appreciate the go-get-iveness. On the signage, so will we be doing good signage in the current location so people understand where it moves to if this moves forward?
Yes, sir. There will be signage before the site's closed. There will be signage after the site's closed. There's going to be information about enforcement at the sites once they're closed. Certainly, we want to make sure those don't become areas where illegal dumping happens, and we'll work on enforcement with our partners.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions because I anticipate people will probably still try to dump there for some period of time until we educate that that's not for that anymore. One thing that I wanted to see if maybe you could provide a little bit better detail, because I think it's an important reason why we've gotten to this point, because I used the one at Westview, and I know I heard a lot of the people from my neighborhood on comments tonight, especially the voicemail about being able to access this. So being 10 minutes from Countryside, I think is good. But I think more importantly, I think it's important to understand why we're moving to this model with a manned station. So maybe you could talk about how much actually gets diverted from those, because I know one of the big concerns has been somebody puts something illegal in one of those bins, the whole thing doesn't go to recycling, is my understanding. So do you have any idea like how much we don't divert percentage-wise roughly from those locations that will actually be diverted to recycling now? Because I think that's really important for people who care about recycling to understand that. And maybe if that's not something you know tonight, maybe that's something that we make as part of what we share out to the public when we announce this new facility when it moves forward. Because I think I think probably the one thing that's hardest for me is the fact that it isn't going to be in the neighborhoods, and I think that's nice for folks. But I think that if you really care about what we're trying to accomplish, what good does it do if it doesn't end up getting recycled because it's misused and it's just not feasible for us to man it? So however we can tell that story, I think it's important. So if you don't have those figures tonight, I certainly would encourage us to share some of that in the future through either social or at the sites or however you want to do it.
Understood. Thank you.
Councilor Zadi?
Thank you. A few questions. So first of all, I'm very excited about this. So thank you for all the work that you've done on this. There was a bill in 2022, I believe then Representative Lisa Cutter, what was it called? Producer responsibility. When is that grant opportunity for us? Is that 26?
2026.
Okay. And what do we know for us what that scale of grant could mean for us, impact-wise?
We don't yet know the magnitude of impact of that grant.
Okay, but I imagine it's going to be pretty significant from what I recall of that bill, which would help subsidize a lot of the costs on this. So I'm interested in learning more about that. 3 questions that came up in the public comments today. The 24/7, so they're currently, so the hours of operation is a big concern. So 9 to 3, 9 to 4. I don't know anyone who can comply with that, right? Without the illegal dumping from a hourly standpoint. What's the plan on making this more accessible to more people timing-wise? Because that's not a reasonable hours of operation, I think.
So 9 to 4 Monday through Thursday, 9 to 3 Friday and Saturday. So this is through a partnership with Sustainability Recycling, where the city isn't operating the site, right? We're not the ones that are staffing it. So we're working within what our partner can provide also. If the city wanted to move to a model where we staffed the site and we ran the site, we could drive hours, but certainly the cost impact is going to be significantly greater than what we're showing. So I think this is what we can accomplish within the budget that we're identifying.
I just want to know why we picked this company and why we decided to let them run it.
So Sustainability Recycling is a local provider that's been in business for 14 years now. They have a wonderful site in Arvada that I think many of us have utilized. It's very clean. It's a very nice site, and I think they're one of the premier providers. They recently opened a location in Broomfield as well, and we believe that they can provide a really good service to transition from the service that we currently have with those unstaffed sites.
Also, why don't we have the large item pickup in our city anymore? This is why we're getting all these big items dumped. I mean, Broomfield still does it. Why don't we?
So the large item pickup we found to be staffing-wise and financially to be unsustainable. We spoke to City Council about that in November of 2022. Since that time, we took direction from City Council to provide additional resources to residents. Those have gone out through a couple of different communication streams, including on the city's website, and they're available if folks call in looking for the large item pickup program. But certainly we moved away from that because it was no longer financially or staffing-wise sustainable, feasible.
Well, I know we're spending $89,000 just to remove the stuff from their dumping. So what was the amount for the one day? I want to know. Plus, the $30 was charged to the residents to do it. So if they're willing to put out the $30, I want to know what the real cost is for one day of that in the spring.
Councilor Ireland, I do have you on the list to ask questions, so I just want to make sure we're able to get through all of Councilor Azadi's questions. Is that okay? So I will come back to you.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So to get back to the hours of operations, is there opportunity to expand those hours over time with the vendor?
This is Melissa from Sustainability Recycling.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm the co-founder of Sustainability. We have been partnering with the city of Arvada for 9 years now, and we run the same hours there. And those hours have been sufficient for the public because you've got a Saturday, a weekend, and there's 6 hours on that Saturday. So people that aren't able to come during the week can, specify that day to come. And then as far as traffic, we see a lot of people coming at lunch. So people will, get some time at lunch and maybe they'll put some stuff in their car and bring it by. And then right at the end of our shift, we'll see a lot of people are getting, don't work a 9 to 5. So it's been sufficient in that city. Certainly 7 days would be, more ideal. We don't see, in the last 2 months, I haven't seen any dumping at our site. We don't have a gated facility, but we have a relationship with the people that are coming because we have direct contact and communication with them, and we put up signs, and there hasn't, been any dumping because people respect the facility they're operating, and it's relational. So it's been sufficient so far.
Thank you for that. I actually missed the Saturday piece. I didn't see that, so it's my fault. I think that makes sense, and it's a good test, right? Either way, something's better than nothing, right, from a time standpoint. 2 more questions. Composting.
So composting is under consideration. It's certainly a service that we would love to offer, but we're still working with the landlord on the site on a setup that they're comfortable with. So it's still under consideration.
Do you have a roadmap on how long that consideration and related to this project, when we'll get to know if we can or cannot do it?
I do not have a timeline.
Can we get one?
It's under consideration.
To have a roadmap? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we will work on a timeline.
Okay. And the last piece is how long will it actually take? I heard 3 to 4 months to get operational. I've heard 1 to 2 years. What's the real number?
We're aiming for April 1st.
April 1st?
April 1st. I'm surprised you didn't throw anything at me.
All right, thank you.
All right, Councilor Carmelia.
I just want to echo some of the concerns that were just voiced about the hours. I want to reiterate, I'm hoping that with time we can consider, interns or partnering with the city or partnering with the county in their sustainable department, something to expand the hours, because I still think, even with the Saturday, I just think that not having evenings and late nights available is really inaccessible for a lot of residents, including myself. And I just want to say this topic is very important to me, and it means a lot to me personally. I've been on the zero waste journey for many years now, and I'm really excited to see us going forward with a better path for recycling, because it's something we haven't always done a great job of. But with that said, I'd like to ask a couple other questions. One, what are some examples of the hard recycling that you mentioned, the 35 plus other options? What are some of those examples? And then I'll continue to let you speak in just a second here. What is the volume expected of the new plant? Because currently we have, as mentioned, a lot of overflow. And so will this new plant allow extra volume to be provided, the volume of 4 plants plus extra? And, well, I guess I already mentioned the hours, so that's it, just the volume is the real question there. And I just want to really impress upon the point that I do hope that we can find more hours somehow, because that's a big pushback I have, and I think that residents may go back to throwing things out.
All right, so I'm going to ask Melissa to come back up here and help me with the hard to recycle and the volume. I do want to make something clear before you jump in. So you said plant a couple of times, and some folks earlier spoke about the condition of the site. I do want to be clear that this would be a collection site, and then the recycling would be compacted and taken to a processing facility that is Republic's Services facility. It would not be processed at the site. It's merely a collection facility.
So, volume with a compactor, the volume can be at whatever level is necessary, because what happens is you just increase the number of pickups, and you don't have to increase the amount of containers or space, or, and we've had many meetings with Republic, and they're willing to accommodate whatever is needed in this situation. And they suspect, based on the current volume that the city has, that it would be approximately 3 pickups a week. It could be that it's every day. It could be that it's twice a day. So that's the benefit of having a compactor, that it can accommodate whatever volume of materials are coming in. And as far as hard to recycle, the main thing that we collect is electronics. It's a huge waste in our society, and we get thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds at our Arvada facility, and it's against the law to throw it away. It actually is supposed to be recycled. Most people don't know that, or don't know where to access places to have it recycled. So e-waste is a huge one. We recycle styrofoam, which is another big waste in our society, because we're all having things shipped to our homes right now. Cardboard's going to be a part of course, the single stream. Something we added this past year is film. Another really, there's a lot of volume of film. That's going to include packaging for the products that we have, bubble wrap, grocery bags. There's about 10 different types of film that we're taking, that I think the residents of City of Westminster who care about recycling will want to divert with us. We take cork, we take the plastic yard signs that go up, during the political times of our year. We take CDs and DVDs, fire extinguishers, smoke alarms. We do compost at the City of Arvada. And I feel pretty confident that it's going to work out, because we're going to find ways to do it where it doesn't impact other businesses next to us around smell and keeping things clean. So we take over 40 items right now. A lot of them are small. Some of them are bigger in volume. But that's an added bonus to what is currently happening right now at Single Stream, and there's going to be 40 plus items that people can bring to the same site at the same time. Decreases carbon footprint, because you can load up your car with all these different things, and rather than going here for bike tires, and here for a fire extinguisher, and here for paint, you can come to one site and have it all taken care of.
Also, before I forget to add, attachment B has an in-depth list.
Do you have any more questions, Councilor?
Thank you so much. I remember my last question. It was mentioned it would be cleaned daily. I believe that's what was said. What does that mean?
So the existing sites are cleaned daily. Do you want to talk about your cleaning practices?
So we'll have 6 to 8 staff there each shift, each day. And our staff will be there to greet customers, educate them on what can and can't be recycled, and show them how the facility works. With the single stream, we'll physically help individuals who are older or disabled with getting things out of the car. Regular residents will show them where to place it. And then with the hard to recycle items, we'll be physically helping people to remove heavy electronics from the car and put them on carts to bring them inside. So single stream's gonna go right into a compactor. We'll be there to make sure that happens. Hard to recycle, we're gonna wheel inside the warehouse. And so nothing will be left out overnight. And that's the expectation of the landlord. So at the end of the day, we pull in all of our signs, we pull in all of our containers, and then it looks like every other business around us.
Councilor Ireland?
So is there an upcharge of how much for these 40 other items?
There's not.
There's not?
There is not
Okay.
an upcharge. But I'm
Do you
sorry.
charge for those extra items? Yeah.
Yes, hard to recycle, so there's another hard to recycle facility in Boulder, it's called EcoCycle.
I've been there.
And they get millions of dollars from the city, they get millions of dollars in grants. It's very costly to run a hard to recycle center. Hard to recycle center is a value, but it costs money because you have to store things, you have to ship things, you have to sort things. With the electronics, you have to take it apart, so you pay for the labor for that. So there is a fee to cover those costs, yes. And that fee differs for each thing. Electronics has a cost by weight, and much of that cost goes to downstream recyclers, ethical downstream recyclers. We vet recyclers, and we only work with recyclers where we know they're doing the ethical thing. So yes, there's some cost. Each thing is different. We advertise it on our website. If you want to see those fees, you could go to sustainability recycling, and there's a list.
Okay. I've actually talked to the Boulder Recycling, and they say that they're self-sustaining with what they sell, except for the machines. AI sorts their machine. Those AI machines they got, those were grants. But everything else, they told me that they are making money on. So.
No, we don't make money off of.
Well, they are. So.
Yeah. Okay.
They are not getting grants other than that.
If they might be getting grants to cover things, but
They said they weren't, because like cardboard's really expensive right now, so that's a moneymaker for them.
we make, right now, we're being paid $60 per ton for 2,000 pounds. But the labor that goes into it doesn't even begin to cover that, or the storage.
I guess
or
the AI helps them though, because that's a sorting for them now, so.
Okay.
Do you have more questions?
I'm just concerned that the contract's so long, because I know there's AI technology coming downstream where you will throw things in a bin and it will sort it for you. So that is coming to us, and I don't know how long it will take, but things are speeding up technology-wise. So for me, the contract is too long, and the startup costs are too high, I think, for what's coming.
So you're saying that some people can put something in a bin and
Yeah,
AI
it's
will
going to
sort
start.
it at their homes?
Yep, at their home.
Councilor Jamont?
Probably gonna make her stand back up again. On the hard to recycle items, I'm just curious, like computer wise, because in fact, I'm an IT guy, so it's just where my mind goes. How do people know to, like, or where does it go? So one of the big challenges with recycling electronics isn't, I mean, one, it's where does it go, because you're not supposed to throw it away. But two, it's what happens to your data and making sure that, you know, those don't get sold off to somebody who's pulling hard drives out of them and stealing people's data. So what does your organization do to protect that, or do you tell people to pull drives? I've been to recycle centers that'll just charge you extra to shred the drives. So could you talk about that portion?
Yes. We collect, we sort, and a majority of our e-waste goes to downstream recyclers who are what's called R2 certified or E-Steward certified. Anything we send off only goes to R2 and E-Steward. And if they have those certifications, it means that they're monitored on a yearly basis to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing, that they're doing what they say they're doing with data, with worker safety, and with, and that things aren't being handled unethically like it had been in the past, sent overseas to third world countries where there aren't safety regulations and it impacts the environment in a massive way. So our downstream recyclers are always R2 or E-Steward certified. When people bring their data-containing materials to us, it's locked in our facility, and then it's locked again inside another container until it goes out to our downstream recyclers.
That's great, and to me, that's a big value to the community because it's a big problem, and we've seen a huge uptick in people getting their identity stolen since COVID. So I wanted to make sure that was the case. And you addressed the other thing that I think is important because we heard it in public comment about where just the waste goes. So I'm pleased to hear that you guys are mindful of that and working with partners that assure that doesn't happen.
Councilor Carmelia?
This last question is directed for our city staff. Could we look into our sustainability department having interns to eventually help with the staffing of this facility?
Yes, that's something we can look into.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that it would be interesting to see also if there's an opportunity for volunteering as well in order to amplify hours. I just had a couple quick questions. In the slide where you listed the cost comparison to 2023 versus what we're looking at, does the $194,000 include tenant improvements, or is that a separate cost that's not listed?
That's a separate cost. That's a separate cost.
Do you have an estimate of what that is?
$150,000. Yep, $150,000 for site improvement and equipment expenditures.
Okay, and so that's going to be in addition to the 265, which is the annual. The 150 is a one-time, so we won't be repeating it on an annual basis, correct? Okay. So kind of similar to the mayor, I had some concerns about the traffic impact to resulting from this site. Could you speak to that? You had given me some numbers on daily traffic, but also routing of not only drop-off, but truck traffic.
Yeah. So sustainability recycling saw an average of 75 customers or vehicles per day over 6 to 7 hours at their Arvada site when it collected common recycling. The proposed site plan was reviewed with planning staff and our traffic engineers, and an alternative traffic plan was discussed if access from Harlan were to become an issue. As I mentioned earlier, we've spoken a number of times with Republic Services, who will pick up the common recycling, about limiting the impacts of our truck traffic. And certainly we talked about the compactor being able to limit that. We think that will be in the realm of 3 to 4 pickups per week.
Do we have a plan for, I think just hearing some concern about the hours, as well as this thought about how do we track the traffic impact over time to this area? Do we have a way to ensure that community, the surrounding community has a way to provide input, as well as our residents, in terms of being able to comment on the hours, and is it working for them?
Yeah. We've surveyed residents and folks that are using the existing sites. I think we could do the same at this location and open up for comment and other opportunities there as well.
Okay. And I think that was the end of my questions. I just wanted to check back in with Councilor Hott and the mayor, see if you had any additional questions.
is the mayor. I'm good.
Okay, do we have?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Counselor Hott. Do we have a motion, or do you have a comment?
No, also getting ready for the motion if you're ready.
Okay, Counselor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to adopt resolution number 1, authorizing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement and sublease agreement to establish a centralized drop-off recycling site.
You have a second?
I second.
All right, let's do roll call.
Counselor Hott,
Yes.
Mayor McNally,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela,
Yes.
Counselor Ireland,
No.
Counselor Carmelia,
Yes.
Counselor Demott,
Yes.
and Counselor Azadi.
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
Okay, we don't have any old business or second readings, but we do want to take a poll on entering into executive session before we adjourn.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, actually, two questions. First would be to allow the remote participation of both Mayor McNally and Councilor Hott in the executive session. And pursuant to the Westminster Municipal Code 111.3, a 2/3 vote is required for remote participation in an exec session. So I would just ask Mayor Pro Tem if you could poll your colleagues as to their willingness to allow the remote participation.
Okay, I'd like to poll the council as to the remote participation for the mayor and Councilor Hott.
I'm fine with it. So yes.
Councilor Demott?
Yes.
Councilor Carmelia?
Yes.
Councilor Azadi?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Councilor Hott?
Yes.
And I do as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Then the proposed exec session this evening that would conclude the night's meeting is to confer with the city attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice concerning the city's potential participation in litigation of per and polyfluorinated substances, or PFAS, related claims pursuant to CRS 2464024B and Section 111.3C3 of the Westminster Municipal Code.
All right, I'm going to poll my colleagues on entering into an exec session. So Councilor Ireland?
Yes.
Councilor Demott?
Yes.
Councilor Carmelia?
Yes.
Councilor Azadi?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Councilor Hott?
Yes.
And yes, for me. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. We'll head over for our post session.
That's all those, you guys. Oh, I see there's some active. Cemetery lifestyle, that's not good, not good, not good, not good.
Okay. Did we have Counselor, so we
They're
have
both
Counselor
on.
Houghton there online, okay.
Yep.
All right, so starting, I don't know what the official language is to initiate the post session, but we are now in post meeting, and we're gonna receive a presentation from our General Counsel, Sam Light. Yeah, governing best practices.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, staff. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Sam Light, and I'm Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel for CIRSA. For the new members of council, CIRSA stands for the Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency. That's kind of a mouthful, which is why we call it CIRSA. He's an insurance provider for property and casualty coverage, and among the services we provide to our members is we provide elected and appointed officials presentations and trainings. So this evening's presentation is a quick refresher, I guess is what I would call it, for those who've I visited with before, and I know we have a couple of new members on council as well. And it's to provide some suggestions around risk management and liability and best practices at the governing body level within the organization. I did want to make just another comment or two about CIRSA. So we're not a commercial insurance company. We're what's called a public entity self-insurance pool. And our only members, our only book of business is insuring Colorado cities and towns. We insure about 85% of the municipalities in the state of Colorado. And we appreciate and are very proud of our longstanding relationships with our members. To give you a sense of that, we had a recent anniversary. Well, now we're into 2024, but we just passed our 40-year milestone. And we did that in partnership with the city of Westminster, which was actually one of the founding members of CIRSA back in 1982. And so we appreciate and value our longstanding relationship with the city. So tonight, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to quickly go through some slides with suggestions for best practices around governance and risk management at the governing body level. The slides are in your packet. There was a handout, I think, that made your packet as well. There's also a copy, electronic copy of the handbook that I handed out, which is a book written about risk management issues and liability principles. We hope it's helpful to you from the governing body level. I do have to admit it was written by a bunch of attorneys, but hopefully it's kind of light on the legalese and more helpful in practical terms in helping you think about risk management issues from that governing body level. And then the last handout was an introduction to CIRSA to tell you more about what we do. So let's dive in a little bit. I want to go through my slides and then leave time for questions if you would like. I know it's getting kind of late in the evening, so I want to be respectful of your time. We'll talk a little bit about the role of public official. We'll talk about transparency. Just have a slide or two about ethics and due process. I just want to introduce those concepts to you. Well, we do separate trainings on ethics and due process requirements, but I just want to get those on your radar as well. And then we're going to talk about, as well, organizational structure and liability. For those of you that have seen my presentation before, I do have to make one disclaimer, which is though I am an attorney, this is not an attorney-client communication. You'll have one of those after I'm done and you kick me out of the room for your executive session. So when we do questions, I'm happy to field questions and give you CIRSA's perspective on risk management issues. But if my radar is telling me that that's a kind of a burning question of the day that you've got going on here in the city, then that's for your city attorney and his team. Same thing if your question relates to something that is really in your city manager's wheelhouse. Again, I can give you a couple of CIRSA thoughts, but that's for your city manager and his team to provide you support in that regard. So let's dig in real quick. As I mentioned, my presentation is kind of structured as suggestions for best practices that I hope will help elevate how you work together as a governing body and also manage risk. My first suggestion may not sound like much of a risk management principle, but it really is. And that is, right, remember to commit always to the role of public official. Once you become an elected official, member of the governing body, your role and relationship to the community changes dramatically. Do we all agree with that notion? Right, you're no longer just a citizen of the city of Westminster, you are a government official. And that really is a 24/7 job from a certain perspective, right? It's not, don't give up your personal life and please enjoy it. But as we know, in the eyes of your citizens and your constituents, they will always, right, perceive you to be a member of the city council, a representative of the council, and a representative of the city. And, you know, as they should, your words, your deeds, your actions matter, have an effect, leave an impression. If a citizen thinks an interaction they have with you didn't go the way they thought it might, that can leave a residue, right, with them. And in a bad situation, it can potentially raise liability concerns. So keep that in mind. Obviously, when you become an elected official, you're no longer an outsider to local government. You're now the insiders. And it has liability consequences from this perspective. You know, on the outside, we all know folks who stay on the outside with intentionality, right? And they kind of say, well, there's things I can do as a citizen advocate or citizen activist, right, where I can be more effective and certain rules don't stick to me. But on the inside, right, once you take that oath of office, I swear to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Colorado and the charter and ordinances of the city, those rules, they stick to us. And we're bound, right, as fiduciaries of the organization to follow those rules. It doesn't mean that, you know, within your legislative role that you can't change rules, right, if you find they need some changes, but you have to do that within the proper legal framework. But, you know, the council's rules of procedures, the ordinances that govern both procedurally and substantively how you make decisions, you're duty bound to follow those rules now. Remember also that at the top of the organizational structure, you as elected officials individually and as a council are, you know, representatives, ambassadors, fiduciaries of the organization. We all know what a fiduciary is, right, in the legal sense. That's the obligation to put the interests of the organization that we serve as a fiduciary above all other interests. And we agree with that notion that sometimes that ain't easy, right? Sometimes you're going to have a full room out there and there are going to be different ideas on what you should be doing. You know, people may be diametrically opposed in their opinions of what you ought to be doing. But I think in terms of serving that fiduciary role, one very important power and prerogative that you have as a council is to, you know, and use it wisely in view of serving that fiduciary role, is to take the time you need, right, and to get the information that you need to make good decisions as a council. You'll face those situations where sometimes something doesn't feel ripe, or you feel like you need more information from your staff on what your options are, or maybe it's an area where there are some legal risks to it and you need more advice, right, from your council on what your options are and where the trouble spots may lie. Take the time to get that information. It'll serve you well. Particularly for the new folks, but for everyone, we got a couple of meetings under the belt now. Let me ask this question: who likes process? Do you like process? Yeah, and, well, we kind of get a bad rap once in a while in local government about process. People say, oh, it takes so long, or it's bureaucratic, or those kinds of things. But in local government, process, right, in certain areas is deliberate and intentional in terms of making good decisions, and also in involving people in decision making. I recommend to you to embrace process as a product in and of itself, because that really is something you provide as a product. The citizens come to you in your council meetings, express the needs and wants of the community, and you're uniquely positioned within the organizational structure to help determine how, right, the city puts governmental resources on those needs and wants. And at the end of the day, no matter how votes turn out, we all probably will win some and lose some. But a great place to be in terms of building faith and trust in government is to provide great process in and of itself as a product of the council. Also, I think it's true for everyone in the organization, but particularly at the elected and appointed official level, part of the job duties is delivering good governance. I think fundamentally that depends upon committing to a couple of core civics principles that I've listed here, along with the related legal concepts. So, for example, commit to openness and transparency, and you'll have few, if any, disputes, lawsuits concerning compliance with the open meetings law. Commit to predictability and even-handedness. For the new members, I hope the first thing that the clerk's office didn't give you was that, I don't think they do that anymore, but the ordinances of the city, there's hundreds of pages in this big volume of, well, it's all out there still, but it's just digital now, right? They don't give you the big book anymore. But those laws govern, right, how you make decisions, both substantively and procedurally. You want to commit to applying those rules predictably and even-handedly. You want to avoid situations, right, where the sense of some potential claimant is that the council is taking novel and unprecedented interpretations of its rules, right, in view of potentially turning someone down or approving someone in a way that violates other people's rights or creates perceptions that rights are being violated. The last bullet here may not sound like a risk management perspective, but it really is to the extent, there's risk to outside parties and there's risk for every governing body for ultimate. And I think mutuality of respect goes a long way. You're going to have disagreements, but you can have disagreements without being disagreeable in terms of respect for each other's differing opinions, right? Your council meetings, your deliberations should always be a space where everyone feels safe to express their view on the subject matter, no matter how different than any other member's viewpoint. I think it's a wise council that does those things together, right? That builds the council as an institution. So that goes a long way. And then with regard to the citizens, right? There is underlying some risk, the concept of respect, right? People may go home from a meeting, they may be upset with what you decided. They may even say to themselves, well, I'll never agree with council about the decision they made, but you know what? I still feel like I was heard, and it was a good process, and I was respected, and that's a great place to be in terms of building faith and trust in yourselves as elected officials and in the council as an institution. I assure you that for some claims that we see, the flip side of that is also true. Someone goes home from that and says, not only do I disagree, but I feel like there were some strange things going on at the hearing. I feel like I wasn't heard, and I feel like I wasn't respected. Sometimes those are people mad enough that they become would-be claimants. And I'm so mad about this, I'm going to find a way to legally challenge it as well. Okay. Pivoting, let's talk about organizational structure and liability. It's true in every organization, but we've got some statutes around this here in Colorado. But it's important from a risk management perspective that everyone within the organization recognize and honor their role, their job description. Everyone within a municipal organization has a job description. Elected official, appointed official, employee, even volunteers have a job description. So let's break that down a little bit. I want to start first by emphasizing, particularly for the new members, that you do have protections. I hope your first question for the city attorney was not, can I get sued as an elected official? But the answer is, sure you can, right? We know that. But in Colorado, we have nice protections. And to just put it in a nutshell, this is what they basically say. They say the city, and by extension, its insurer, CIRSA, will defend you and pay judgments against you for acts or omissions as a council member. Good news. There's protection. There are some conditions to that. Those protections only apply so long as you're acting within the scope of employment, right, and not acting in a willful and wanton manner. So two interesting phrases. Scope of employment really just means duties, understanding what one's authority is, and as important, understanding what authority has been given to others. I'll give you an example of how that concept works, just borrowing from your charter. Your charter, in terms of allocation of responsibility between the council and the manager, right, says that the manager recommends the budget and administers the budget. In between those two pieces is what? The council role of adoption of the budget, right? Within whose, another example, kind of a glib example, but within whose scope of employment, within whose job description is it to decide whether or not a business within the city gets a business license? The clerk, right? The ordinances say the manager's or the manager's office does an investigation to make sure all the boxes are checked, but then the clerk. So the flip side of that, in terms of organizational structure and liability, then asks the question, well then, whose job ain't it? Within whose scope of employment ain't it, right? And that's everybody else. So this idea of allocation of authority and responsibility permeates every organization. So you want to keep that in mind and look at things like the powers and duties that are set out in the charter and the ordinances and so on. The other interesting phrase there, just to touch on where the outer boundaries of your protections are, is this phrase called willful and wanton conduct, right? You're protected as long as you're within the scope of employment and not engaging in willful and wanton conduct. Willful and wanton conduct is just conduct that's intentionally undertaken, designed to injure someone's rights, and taken with reckless disregard for what their rights are. I got an even simpler way of describing it. I just call it bad stuff. And it really would be bad stuff. Our claims people tells me that we, knock on wood, or something close to it, we don't get many claims alleging willful and wanton conduct. But the most common fact pattern that we see when those situations arise is almost always this. It's almost always an individual, elected or appointed official or employee, misperceiving that they have governmental authority that they don't have, right? Throwing on the purported cloak of governmental authority and doing bad things to people for the wrong reasons. And that's where that significant potential personal liability risk lies. And it really would be bad stuff. It would be like engaging in malicious conduct. It would be, to use a simple example, maybe a appointed official who's not thinking correctly about an issue conscripts a staff member into going on a campaign to make sure a business competitor gets their business license revoked, or their building red tagged, or engaging in intentional defamation, those kinds of things, or malicious conduct, or of course criminal conduct. There is kind of a relationship between that willful and wanton concept and your insurance protection, because your insurance coverage, we provide you with public officials liability coverage. That insurance follows the same concept and says we insure you in your capacity as an elected official for acts or omissions within the course and scope, with exclusions for things like malicious conduct, criminal conduct, willful and wanton conduct. So those are how the protections work. I don't mean to be a grim reaper on that, but I wanted to stake out where the boundaries are on those protections, and also end with a silver lining, which is this. Do not let the fear of liability drive your decision making, right? If you know as a council that you're making the right decision through a fair and defensible process, applying the appropriate criteria, you're going to be just fine. And that's what these protections are for. You know, I get it, and sometimes the heat of the moment, somebody says, if you do that, council, I'm going to sue each and every one of you individually, right? Again, if we know those things are true, then we're going to be in just fine, okay? That was the state law protection. I just wanted to point out, of course, there's the possibility of being sued in state court or federal court. Those protections I just mentioned are under the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act. From a federal perspective, there's a similar concept. The CGIA, the state statute, provides a type of qualified immunity. At the federal level, you also enjoy qualified immunity, right? And you're protected from federal liability, federal personal liability, right? Insofar as your conduct does not violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. And we're all reasonable persons. It begs the question, how do I know? Right? How do I know when we're getting on thin ice? And that's what your staff's there to support you, right? From your prerogative in terms of risk management, you as a council, and you should not hesitate to raise these issues. You know, if we feel like this seems a little risky, council, what are our options? Staff, what are our options? Can we talk about pros and cons of an issue before we proceed? And that will help protect you, okay? All that, of course, the scope of employment concept begs the question of what is the city structure? What is the council's job description? The newer members, you may have gotten some orientation on this already, but as you know, the City of Westminster operates as a home rule city, which means you get to write your own charter. You've adopted your own charter, gives you some more control at a local level, right? But you have a home rule charter and you are a council manager form of government, which, by the way, is the most common form of government for Colorado municipalities. I don't talk about it too much, but under that structure there truly is, in terms of scope of employment and allocation of powers between policymaking or legislative roles, which is your role on the one hand, and administration on the other. To borrow the language from your charter, the council is the legislative and governing body of the city, right? The mayor, as the presiding officer, has certain executive and ceremonial powers. And then the manager, just like a private entity, by analogy, is your CEO. Your charter actually calls it chief administrative officer, right? Responsible for the administrative affairs, the operations, getting things done on a day-to-day basis consistent with the vision and policy and legislative prerogatives as outlined by the council. And those are the charter provisions there cited in the slide. So all that, of course, emphasizes that certain duties are performed by the council and certain duties are performed by staff. And those allocations of authority and responsibility, they serve, it's not that there's not silos, it's mutually supportive, right? But those allocations help to define your structure, how things get done, and they also define your scope of employment. To illustrate that in the graphic sense, right? Where does the council spend its effort and energy? The governing body, the legislative arm of the organization, the legislative and governing body, their primary role and job structure within the charter and ordinances is policy setting, legislation, big picture, forward-looking. I think if I could be so bold, I would suggest that the most important documents to the governing body are things like the annual budget, the long-term plans, the 5-year capital plan, the questions of where do we want this community and organization to be in 3, 5, and 10 years, right? It's the governing body that has the longest time horizon in comparison to your manager and his team who are looking at getting work done at an administrative level. So the governing body has the broadest time horizon, has the broadest interest in mind, and is working together in its fiduciary role as a council to protect and enable the organization and secure its assets and be an ambassador and champion for the organization. If that's of interest to you, at the very bottom, probably not legible on the slide, if those concepts of governance are of interest to you, the source of the information on this slide is from a book called John Carver, Boards That Make a Difference, that talks more about the relationship and the mutually supportive relationship between the governing body, the legislative arm of the organization on the one hand, and administration on the other. Okay? From a risk management perspective, this concept of scope of employment or role discipline is particularly important in the area of employee relations and administrative matters assigned to staff. As you well know, right, Council, you have a couple of direct reports, right, but elected and appointed officials generally are not employee supervisors, right? Your direct reports are the manager, city attorney, municipal judge.Maybe that's it.
Yep.
Right? And that's where, in terms of a employer supervisory relationship, that's where you want to focus your energy. You hopefully have mutually supportive and agreed upon methods for evaluating performance, determining work plans, and those kinds of things. But recognize that by your charter and your ordinances, responsibility for all other personnel matters and control of the administrative organ of the organization is already assigned by your charter to the city manager and his team. Now, I will tell you from an employment practices liability standpoint, from where you sit as the counselors, that's a great place to be, because that is a risky area, right? And so managers and your full-time professionals who deal with employment matters trust that there are procedures and mechanisms in place to deal with those issues. These concepts are enshrined in your charter that I've mentioned the sections there. Just to give you a sense of that, if they're worth checking out. Your charter says that council members do not dictate or interfere with the city manager respecting exercise of judgment in the appointment or employment of city employees, and except for inquiry, shall deal with the administrative service solely through the city manager. I hope your city manager, we invite you to chime in if I misstate this, but this concept of inquiry, right? Yeah, it's always fine to make an inquiry, and we're a collegial group, right? And we're a friendly group, and you may ask a question of a department head, but recognize from an employee's perspective, right? The concept of an interaction between an elected official and a staff member, from where the staff member sits, if an individual council member is approaching them with an idea or a thought, they may be misperceiving that as, am I being given an order, right, from an elected official? Those are really things you want to have that kind of conversation. Who's your resource? Who's your point person? Your manager, right? And your manager is your point of contact, your resource, right, for your relationship with the administrative service of the organization. Here's a few more tips to avoid concerns around role discipline or scope. As I mentioned earlier, think about and respect the allocations of authority already made via your charter, ordinances, and organizational structure. They're there to serve and protect you, right? It was either the voters by the charter or you as a council by your own ordinances decided this is where we want to spend our energy and this is where we want to give away responsibility to others in the organization. And recognize it goes all directions, right? My scope of employment, I failed to mention how it runs the other direction, right? Within whose scope of employment, within whose job description is it to decide whether or not the city enters into a contract for $500,000? Is that above your purchasing authority?
It is.
Okay. You know, whose job is that? Council and council only, right? Whose job description is it to decide whether or not, well, example from this evening, whether or not we vacate a right-of-way or enter into a long-term lease? Those are the council responsibilities regarding interest and assets of the organization. Okay? Other thoughts, of course, is keep in mind that being on a multi-member governing body is a we job. We each bring our own perspectives, experiences, ideas to the table in terms of our deliberations, but at the end of the day, we're working towards that one voice of council, whether expressed as a unanimous vote or a unanimous head nod or a contentious 4-3 vote. It is a we job. And councils do their work and act by voting on matters that come before you in a public meeting. Your city attorney and I like that because when you're acting in a public meeting as the legislative body, there are a bunch of additional legal privileges that attach to that activity. And just to put it in practical terms, doesn't it sound a lot weirder if someone says, well, I'm going to sue each and, well, no, that council decision, I don't like it, but I'm going to sue you and just you. You know, wait a second, this was an action of the entire legislative body. How could I be individually and personally responsible for that? So there's protection in numbers, and of course, the open meetings law says that council only acts as a council and has to do so in a public meeting. And all those ordinances that you have when it talks about the councils of all the council's power, right? Those can only be exercised by the council as a group, right? There are no provisions of your ordinances that say the powers of council can be exercised by any one member of the council. So, okay. Just a few more thoughts on that. I think the concept of role discipline does require some personal commitments every now and then that strengthen the we being the institution of the council, right? Municipal governance in a certain way is kind of like a train. The council as an institution keeps moving forward. And those who serve on it get on and off that train during their terms of office, but where do we all want to go as a community? We want that train to keep going towards its destination. And I think sometimes it requires commitment to personal conduct that strengthens that journey. Just some examples of that are setting aside a personal agenda when there's lack of support, right? If during campaigning or now we're on council, we say, well, this is the issue for which I got elected, and I want us to have an ordinance that does this, whatever that may be. If we're unable to find, at least 3 other council members to come along with us, we have to be willing to shelve that personal agenda in service of the work plan of the council as collectively identified by the council. How about this one? Do you have some split votes every now and then? You probably do, right? If you're on let's say we have a 4-3 vote and you're on the 3 side, is it okay to go back to your folks, the people you take counsel from, your constituents, and tell them, I didn't vote for that one? Well, I'm just the insurance person. Far be it from me to say what sure, absolutely. But in terms of the fiduciary role and building the strength of the institution of council, would the message be different if said, yeah, I didn't vote for that one, but you know what? We as council had a very healthy debate about that issue. We had a lot of differing opinions. I fought like heck from my point of view, but the council decided to go a different direction. And you know what? I respect the voice of the council. Right? That builds the council as an institution. And as I mentioned earlier, probably be a situation where we'll all win some or lose some at some point. So I think those things that build the council as an institution are important. There's a couple other there as well. Recognize that in this division of responsibilities, there are certain times when things can only be done by council, and then when council's work is done, you hand it off to staff. And recognize that if we were on the 3 side of a 4-3 vote, well, we don't have to be the main cheerleader of the decision, but we certainly, after it's handed off to staff, cannot individually attempt to undermine the decision that was reached by the council. Okay. All right, I want to pivot and talk about transparency just a little bit. I'm sure you've got great support from your staff and city attorney's office on this issue, but particularly for the new folks, just want to emphasize that you're all bound by the Colorado Open Meetings Law, right? And of course, the policy statement of that statute is, it says, and I think I quote, hopefully verbatim here, that it's the policy of the state of Colorado and a matter of statewide concern that the formation of public policy, right, is public business and shall not be conducted in secret, right? So that requires that discussions of 3 or more council members of any public business have to occur in a meeting open to the public, and also that any actions by council have to occur only in a duly called and agendized public meeting. Some of the current risk issues we're seeing around this issue are in the good hands of your city attorney. There's been a couple of recent decisions about the call and conduct of executive sessions. You may even get some, on the ground opportunities this evening to see what that looks like in terms of self-regulating, make sure we're staying on topic in executive session, and those kinds of things. That's what's going on in our world. There are attorneys around the state who will look at your agendas, watch your meeting videos, and make sure you've dotted all the T's, it's getting late, dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's with regard to the conduct of executive session. Staff's going to take care of you there, but in terms of risk management, I think from where you sit, the only suggestion I would make is that if any member of the council feels like something might have gone astray in doing the motion of the announcement, you'll just want to, raise that point, right? Staff, have we got everything right before we convene an executive session? That'll serve you well. So I mentioned that the openness requirement is a rule of 3. Whenever 3 or more members discuss public business, that has to be open to the public. So it's a rule of 3. We all agree that one-on-one discussions are okay? Yeah. That's an important part of the job. We have coffee with a fellow council member, get to understand each other's perspectives and thoughts. Don't do that on a quasi-judicial matter, okay? We'll talk about that in a minute. But also, if it's a rule of 3, that must mean 3 is where the rule kicks in. One-on-one is okay. What do we think about one-on-one on one-on-one on one-on-one on one? Is that okay? All right, they have different names for that. Sometimes they call them serial meetings or daisy chain meetings. In Texas, they call them a walking quorum. All right? Walking around getting a quorum. So recognize this is kind of a high-profile issue these days because there's been a couple of pieces of litigation that the popular press has picked up on, right? And I'll just leave you with this takeaway. Do not use one-on-one discussions in a series, right, as a substitute for the deliberations that must occur in your duly noticed public meetings. Another way of looking at it from a transparency perspective is if the sense is that the action taken at your meeting was a mere rubber stamping of some decisions that were reached outside of the council meeting, that's where the risks lie. And we truly want to self-regulate in this area because there are, right, there's a possibility, just like in Texas, right, that a state legislature writes a very draconian rule, right, that limits your flexibility. Our statute actually doesn't directly address one-on-one. But in Texas, they do have a walking quorum rule, just to give you a sense of this. In Texas, they say if elected officials, with the intent of evading the openness requirement of their statute, use one-on-one discussions to circumvent the openness rule, well, of course, that means any action they took is void, right? But also in Texas, it's a misdemeanor. Wow, that was pretty shocking when I read that statute, right? So we have to self-regulate on these issues, and you all in good sense know where the boundaries lie and when we need to tell each other, wait, let's hold that for our council meeting and that's where you do your best work, is when you get to discuss issues with everybody together and trade perspectives and thoughts on issues. So we need to understand and appreciate those concepts. You do know that the meeting requirement, the openness requirement, does apply to email, right? So keep that in mind. There was a handout about that in the packet. Email's a good tool for some things, but not for deliberation of the policy matters that are in front of you. Staff, I'm sure, will help you and support you with the systems about handling emails. In terms of transparency, we all know, the new members, right? We know that those emails that we send and receive wearing our hat as council member, by and large, are public records, right? There's a couple of exceptions to that. But it leads me back to my old adage, which is wearing your city councilor hat, do not say in an email anything that you wouldn't want to say in a public meeting, or in my world, have read back to you in a deposition, right? Or in another world, have it appear in the newspaper. So those are just some ways of managing those kinds of risk. Okay, on executive sessions, you've already got this in place, but make sure you have good systems to protect confidential information as well. In terms of the fiduciary aspect there, recognize that even if you voted against going into executive session, and let's say the discussion in executive session is some negotiation issue, even if you voted against going into executive session, and even if you can't, stand the idea of the underlying transaction, as a fiduciary, right, you're legally bound to honor that confidentiality of the city, okay? Ones that might have public interest to them, right, like leaving tonight's executive session, you may have a citizen wanting to ask you, well, what did you talk about with regard to the PFAS litigation, right? A good tool before leaving the executive session in terms of managing that confidentiality is perhaps just a presiding officer, or someone says, of all the confidential information that we've talked about in this executive session, which information, if any, leaves the room and who is our spokesperson? And I think that's a good way to identify whether there's going to be any public information released at that time and how those communications will occur. All right, just want to get on your radar the concept of the Code of Ethics. Maybe wasn't foremost on your mind when you took that oath of office, but of course you became subject to the Code of Ethics. I know the codes of ethics can seem like they're written in legalese, and they are, right? But you want to take the opportunity to kind of plow through those provisions, right? You've got some in your charter that I've talked about here, and there's some state statutes that might apply to you as well. But just take the time to get a good working familiarity with what those rules say. I think in terms of risk management, right? The risk with regard to liability from an ethics standpoint is a personal risk, right? Like if somebody challenges a decision of the city council, that's usually a lawsuit against council as a whole in its official capacity. But the ethics liability is potential personal liability. So you want to make sure you have a good working familiarity with that, right? Understand the concepts of what a conflict of interest is, right? And when you're required to disclose your conflict of interest and recuse yourself from council discussion and voting, okay? Of course, there's a provision, I think, in your code about do not use confidential information for any personal benefit. You have a gift rule in your, I believe it's in your ordinances, maybe it's in your charter, but take a look at that as well. Managing the risk around gifts. Yeah, there's the liability side of it, but I tell you from all the years I've been doing this, the risk oftentimes ends up being one that you see in the newspaper, and so much about gifts and this or that is about timing and context, right? The major rules: don't accept any gift, no matter what its value, if it's clear that gift is being offered to curry your favor for some official action or reward you for some official action. So it's so much about timing and context. And then lastly, it really is the idea of making the Code of Ethics your best friend. And I know it sounds a little weird because you may be thinking, well, Code of Ethics, what do you mean? It's all traps, right? But it's not. It sets the expectations for your service as a public official, and it protects you, because if there are, as there are, written down rules that set the expectations and we have a good working familiarity with it, then we're better prepared to spot issues before they arise. We're also better prepared to have that conversation with this scenario. Sometimes elected officials do face substantiated, right, inappropriate complaints regarding some ethical transgression. But do you agree with this notion that once in a while an elected official is the target of some off-the-wall accusation regarding a breach of ethics, right? If we have a good working familiarity with what the rules are, then we're prepared for that conversation. We can tell that person, dear citizen, I respectfully disagree. Here's what the rules require of me, and I have considered the rules and in compliance with the rules. Okay. Lastly, after you do all your analysis about whether you have an actual conflict or an actual issue that you need to deal with by a certain course of conduct, just recognize fair or unfair, right? In matters of government ethics at the local government level, right? Sometimes perception is reality and reality is perception. That's not to dictate an outcome. In any particular case, it's just to tell you that there's probably a risk that's above my pay grade in terms of legal compliance with the code of ethics, where you want to think about, right, in terms of, is this the appropriate course? Is this the course that's most consistent with my fiduciary responsibility to the organization? Okay. My last substantive topic I want to mention just briefly is just get on your radar this idea of providing a due process. So, fascinating job to be a local government elected official because you have a bunch of different hats that you wear. Sometimes you're a legislator and you're making general rules by adopting an ordinance. And when you do that, you know, if you adopt an ordinance, I know that wasn't on tonight's agenda, but let's say you adopt a new ordinance about recycling, right? And it's setting requirements for citizens regarding recycling or plastic bags or what have you. Well, in that situation, there's no one in particular that it applies to. It applies to everyone in general, right? And it applies somewhere down the road, right? But in this other context, you sometimes make decisions affecting individuals' property rights. And from where you sit, that's usually limited to land use matters that come in front of the council, right? And in that situation, you're not setting general rules, you have a specific applicant in front of you, right? That's a pretty awesome power, right? Land use control, as we learned from the issues going on with Governor Polis's initiative last year, we're pretty strong that we want local control for land use, right? And we want the ability to decide at a local level whether this project gets developed or that land gets subdivided, right? Or this or that person gets a development permit, right? But if we want that power, we have to make sure we give them their due process rights, right? No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So this is the local government version of that, but it's the same constitutional principle at stake, where we have to give people their due process rights. And in terms of that, I just want to get on your radar to make sure you're familiar with the due process rules of engagement that apply to those quasi-judicial matters. It's wholly different than making legislation. When you're working on an ordinance, let's say it's a general ordinance about, I don't know if you have this or not, but let's say the idea for an ordinance is, let's change our land use rules and require EV charging stations. Well, heck, when you're working on that kind of ordinance, you can lobby and be lobbied. You can vote yes or no because you love or hate the idea. You can whip up people to come out in opposition or come out in support. You can do your own research. But when you're sitting in judgment of someone's property rights, right, all of those kinds of legislative concepts and norms of behavior are out the window. And you have to get into the mode of acting like a judge, right? You have to be fair, impartial, neutral, not engage with people outside of the hearing, which is really a mini trial from a due process perspective. So there's some tips about that there. The last tip I want to mention, of course, is what I call the lonely part of the job. What happens when you have a controversial land use development from a citizen's perspective? And fair enough, their first inclination is, well, there's a controversial subdivision application coming up, and I want to talk to my council members about it, right, from their perspective. And that's fair from their perspective, but from where you sit as the 7 individuals who have the right to pass judgment, right, you have to remain detached from that, and you can't engage in what we call ex parte or outside the hearing communications. That just means it's, you need to tell that citizen, it's not that I don't want to hear from you, but as a matter of fairness, as the judge, I can't talk to you about that land use application outside of the hearing. They say, well, why is that? A good way to, your staff can help you with talking points on that, but one way to look at it is, if it were your application, right, would it seem fair that the decision makers were talking about the application outside of the hearing, or that they had prejudged the application before hearing the evidence? Those kinds of things, okay? So there are a lot of concepts around that in the time we have. I just wanted to introduce that subject. And at the bottom of the slide, there are a couple of links on some training materials we've done at CIRSA around that. I just want to end the introduction of the quasi-judicial process with a suggestion about, maybe it's a little selfish on CIRSA's part, but I'm really lobbying for my defense attorneys here. When you have controversial land use decisions, we love it when you all as council members have a deliberation with each other on the record at the end of that hearing, discussing with particularity why you're going to vote yes or no. Staff's going to be there to support you, to remind you of what the criteria are. If there are legal issues that come up, don't be hesitant at all to ask counsel, hey, how is that rule interpreted? What does our ordinance say about that issue? But when you're talking with each other about why you're voting yes or no, a couple of magical things are happening. The applicant and the citizens in the room are getting an understanding, right, of how you're going to decide the case. But importantly, from a defense perspective, you are making the record of the reasons that will support that decision all the way through any challenge. Because when we go to court, there is no other trial. All there will be is the record of your hearing as a council. So we love deliberations. Use my rule of why, and that's ask each other, why do you feel this way? Someone says, yeah, Mayor, I'll start the discussion. I'm going to vote no against this development because I don't like it. Well, that's a little bit of a rocky start, but you all can get there just by asking each other, well, why? Right? Why don't you like it? Well, I don't like it because it doesn't meet our criteria. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Well, and which criteria? Why doesn't it meet our criteria? And then maybe the next discussion is, well, because it doesn't meet our height requirements. And when we do that, we're with each other building a strong record to support your decision. Okay? I want to get out of the weeds there and just give you a couple of concluding thoughts. I guess I've learned in my years at CIRSA that there are a lot of aspects of risk management that we and our members and their elected and appointed officials we can't fully control. Things like public perceptions and what the claimants are going to do. I've seen a lot of surprising claims. The inclination of what the judges will do when they hear these cases, the enactment of the federal or state legislatures. But I think embracing wise leadership in the areas that you can control is going to go a long way, right, in strengthening the council as a council, strengthening the city as a city, right, and support your success and reduce your risk. There's just a couple examples there, right? Internally as an organization, as a council, things like embracing your house rules, right? That's a wonderful document. I would encourage you to take a look at that. Periodically, talks about the way the council interacts and deals with issues internally. Dealing effectively with discord, I mentioned that. How are your public comment periods going? I got to witness some tonight, but sometimes they can kind of get a little crisp, a little sharp. Well, hey, emotions are running high. People are passionate, right? But sometimes recognize in a risk management perspective that the job for you all may sometimes even require civility, even in the face of incivility, right? And that's an important aspect as well. There are certain risks, and particularly civil rights risks, where the risk exposure can get heightened if there's a sense that there was retaliation, right? Or we acted solely in reaction to something that was going on. May not sound like a risk management thing, but I think it's a wise leadership thing because maybe we don't hear it enough with all the things that are being said about things that aren't getting done. But I think it's a great role of the governing body as the ambassadors, the champions of the organization to tout council's successes, tout your staff's successes, right? That builds faith and trust that you're getting great things done on behalf of your community, right? In that regard, use your manager and staff as a resource, right? And that'll serve you well. So, close it by, I guess, overarching risk management theme is to commit to the service of the city as a guardian of its interests and assets, right? As a champion of the council as an institution, and embracing the fiduciary stewardship and responsibilities of council membership. With that, I'll stop. I'll open it up to any questions. There are a couple of remaining slides with some resources for you all and a little bit more about CIRSA, but Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and Council mayor and council member online as well, and staff, thanks for having me out this evening. Any questions that I can ask?
I'm gonna
Answer
check.
for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna check, thank you, and I'm gonna just check with the mayor and Councilor Hott to see if either has a question.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
How about at the table? Do we have any questions for Mr. Light?
You did a good job, so I don't have any.
Thank you.
Very thorough.
All right, anything comes to mind, we'd love to hear from our members. Anything ever comes up where you think service can be of help or things we can do better, we'd love to hear from our members. So thank you all very much for having me out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks.
I think do we need to do anything to go into exec session?
We don't, Mayor Pro Tem. At this time, you can conclude the meeting, and then we'll go into recording the executive session once the web stream has been closed.
I would ask that the mayor and councilor now go to the other link that they had gone to earlier, and give me a few minutes and we'll stop this so we can turn over.
Okay, I'll adjourn this and we'll hopefully connect back up in 5 minutes for the exec session. Okay.